which is actually a major part of research, but that is often disregarded. And I feel that in the Euraccess network, as international PhD students, you need to be exposed to this sort of information. So today, the aim of the webinar is mostly an aim of awareness. You will be aware of questions, pitfalls to avoid, of questions to ask yourselves. You will be aware of issues that you might encounter in research data management, and you will be provided with a few tools to try and find the best solution for that, for those pitfalls and issues. But before we really start talking about data management, I would like you to connect to the WooC Lab, because we will be using the WooC Lab a lot today to keep things interactive and to try and, you know, not be too like ex cathedra and too boring or anything. So please, could you follow the instructions on the slideshow, connect to the WooC Lab, keep the WooC Lab open at all times during this session, because I will be popping in a few questions regularly. And for starters, to make sure that everything works, let me know which country you are joining us from. So I can see on the WooC Lab that we have Germany, Spain, Bulgaria. Welcome, everyone. I myself am in Liège in Belgium today, because I am from the University of Liège. Now we have, I don't know, we have like 10 participants, 13 participants, and I see only 3 countries. So I really want to take a few minutes to make sure that everyone is connected. Also, we are having this webinar remotely, which is amazing because it brings people together from all over the place. But I feel like I am talking to myself or to my screen. And I would be really happy if you had the technical possibility to turn your camera back on, if that's okay for you. Keep in mind that the webinar is being recorded, so that might be part of your decision as well. But I would be really happy to be able to see the faces of the people I am talking to, so that we can keep things a little more, you know, yeah, interactive. And I can see all smiling faces popping up. Hi everyone, hello. All right, so Spain, Belgium, Bulgaria, Germany. Let me know where you're from. And if you have even the slightest issue connecting to WooC Lab, let me know now, because you will miss on the exercise part of the webinar. Hi Placida, nice to meet you. Make sure you let us know in the WooC Lab that you're from India, which is awesome. Maybe you are my farthest participant today. It may be, right? Belgium, India, Belgium, Germany, Belgium, Spain, Bulgaria. Is someone from far? Oh, we have China. Yes, yes, maybe this one is a little further away. I don't know, I'm not really sure. Depends on where you are situated. But thank you for telling me where you are from in the chat, but I would really like to make sure that the WooC Lab works. I will not spend like half of the webinar on this, so maybe like 2 or 3 minutes left to connect to the WooC Lab. Follow the instructions on the slideshow and let me know. Let me know if you can connect or not. You will really miss out on the exercises and on the fun stuff if you cannot connect. Hi, Ahmed, nice to meet you. Hey, I can see India popping up on the screen. Thank you. All right, maybe just 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we will go to the presentation itself. Make sure you're connected. Hi, Sandra. Okay, so I will turn off the question in WooC Lab. I have 8 people connected on the WooC Lab and there's 14 participants. So if we take out myself and Albina, maybe Albina is connected, I don't know, but there should be about 12 or 13 people connected to the WooC Lab. Some of you may have technical issues. I'm here to help. Some of you may just choose not to participate. That's fine, but you will miss out on the exercises. All right? You know what? I will leave it open. Yes, you might use your cell phone to connect to the WooClap app. You might open a browser next to your Zoom window or use your smartphone. That's pretty easy. So you go to this address on the website, on the slideshow, sorry. And the link is in the chat, as a matter of fact. So I will retype it in case you have missed on the previous messages. So if you click the link, you should be able to land on the WooClap page. All right, I'll leave it open for a few more minutes and we will start presenting now, otherwise we'll be wasting too much time. So as I told you, I am really thankful for this opportunity in the EURAccess network to talk about research data management to you amazing international PhD students. So we have people from all over the place and it's a real privilege to be able to teach you today about this topic, which is actually my main mission at the University of Liège. I work in the research office. I'm the research data officer at the University of Liège. And I help researchers from PhD students to senior researchers with the choices that we have to make as scientists in research data management. As I told you, research data management covers a lot of the steps in the research project, and at some times, there's some crucial steps in the project, in a research project, be it a PhD thesis or a grant agreement or something, that are sometimes a little bit disregarded. So we will try and make sure that this does not happen to your PhD thesis. Okay, I see that more people are connecting, so I'm really happy about this. All right. I will need to switch to the next question on the WooClap because I see your faces, I know where you are from. In case you missed it, if you are able to turn on your camera, that would make me really happy. Thank you, so that I don't feel like I talk to my screen. I would like to let you know a few of the keywords that we will be discussing today, and I would like to know where you stand on those keywords. Are you familiar with them or have you never heard about them? So here is the next question on the WooClap. Please click on all the terms that you are already familiar with or that you know what they mean, right? Have you ever heard in the scope of your PhD thesis, of course, about research ethics, about data management plans, fair data, Gdpr, metadata, reproducibility, open data, and licenses? This is basically the table of content for today as well. And I would like to know which percentage of you are, for example, familiar with data management plan or metadata or licensing or Gdpr, which is a big one. So my background is mostly scientific, right? I am not a specialist at law. I am not a librarian, for example. I got my PhD 4 years ago in astrophysics, and I've been working for 2 years as the research data officer at the University of Liège, right? So don't worry, today will not be a law seminar about GDPR. That's not my specialty. There are people who are far better at it than me, but we will be discussing it a little bit in the scope of research data management. All right, so it seems that you are really familiar with open data. You have checked this term at 80%. So it means that 80% of you already feel like they know what that is, or maybe already practice it. And the term that you are least familiar with is GDPR and fair data. That's valuable information for me, thank you. Data management plan comes in next together with licenses. All right. Great, thank you for answering. Let's go back to the slideshow. So before we talk about what research data management is, let's just set the record straight and let it be said that I have defined research data, right? It's a little bit difficult to define research data, and it's also a little bit idiotic because it's so vague and so wide that it would be only restrictive to try and provide a definition. Each of you have a different PhD thesis, and each of you has a different perception of what research data is. And we have such a diversity of languages, scientific disciplines, of scientific cultures, universities, institutions, that it would be impossible to provide one single definition for all these contexts. But someone tried to do that about 20 years ago, the OECD, right? And they define data as factual records. Well, I don't feel like this is a good definition, but it's factual records from the reality that we are studying as scientists, right? And there's this quality of something being commonly accepted in the scientific community as necessary to validate research findings. So this is a very careful definition, and it doesn't provide any further information as to what we consider data and what we consider not data. Also, the problem with this definition is that it is only restricted to data with the digital format, so a file or a document. But what about physical data? What about geological samples? What about blood samples? What about manuscripts, right, for the historians among us? What about papers, right? And this data actually this definition, was actually designed from a sharing point of view, because the OECD cares about data sharing, right? Not about data analysis or data collection or whatever else we do with data as scientists. So it needs to be a little bit broadened. And what I want to make sure that we agree on before going into details is that data can be basically anything and everything, right? Which doesn't make our task easy, because data management, if we don't really know what data is, or if we can't really pinpoint what data is, may sound a little bit like a difficult endeavor. But bear with me, this is actually the best definition that you will ever get by example, right? I'm sorry I cannot provide you with more information, but it would be only restrictive. I used to be an astrophysicist. So the data that I used most often were images. Images are both qualitative data, because there's description, it's visual, but it's also quantitative data, because you can, for example, map out the intensity of pixels, right? Or define light profiles of stars and galaxies. Data can be sometimes a little bit more qualitative, a little bit more quantitative. Sometimes it's only quantitative, right? And we can have a little bit of a hybrid. So for example, your data may be physical samples. I mentioned geological sample, medical samples, I don't know, plant samples, any sample you can think of, any physical data you can think of. Can be papers, publications. If they're super old, maybe they're only available in physical format, right? So you don't have a file. Some of you may be working in genomics and working with DNA sequences. These are very specific kinds of files and data. So that's something that exists and that we should not disregard when we try and define research data. If you conduct interviews, for example, you may have audio files that are recorded. Or you may be using Google Forms or another polling tool if you are conducting, I don't know, experiments in sociology, for example, right? You may be polling people. Or maybe you're doing lab work. That's a big one. And then you have experimental results that you measure with like machines, for example, or spectra, right? They are very weird data as well, because they are both qualitative and quantitative. Wow, again. And also some of you may be working on simulations. That also happens a lot in theoretical physics, for example. And what you put in your simulation as a parameter is data. And what comes out of the simulation on which you perform analysis is data as well. Okay. Now, I would like you to go back to the book lab and to tell me if your data is qualitative, quantitative, a bit of both, or if you are unsure. This will help me know if I need to focus more on one side or the other of data analysis and data management. So go back to the WOOC lab. Is your data qualitative, quantitative, a bit of both, or are you unsure? All right. Bear in mind that we have all these examples of data, and that in all these categories of data, we can have both quantitative, qualitative, and a bit of both. So let me know. Also, if you want to, you know what, we will do that after. Let's just first focus on the question, is your data qualitative, quantitative, a bit of both? No one is unsure, which makes me happy. Some of you may also be working with maps, right? That are also a bit of both. Maybe like 30 more seconds for the WOOC lab. 9 of you have answered, so thank you for that. By the way, the WooClap is our tools of communication for the exercise, right? But you have a chat box. Albina and myself are keeping an eye on the chat box. So if you have questions, you can type them in the chat. But you know what? We're not that big a group. If you have a question, maybe if Albina agrees, you can use the raise hand button and we will give you the floor. We will let you turn your microphone back on, and we will have regular question breaks during the presentation, right? So I am not afraid of hearing you speak, right? So 10 people have answered. This is your results. So most of you are a little bit of both, right? And a couple of you have checked quantitative, a couple of you have checked qualitative. So thank you for that information. I will try and keep it balanced between both kinds of data. Now, can you please write down a few words describing your data? Maybe which scientific discipline do you work in? What is the nature of your data? Do you work on simulation results? Do you work on human medical data? Is it data that you have downloaded from an open data database, or are you collecting it yourself? Are you using maps, physical samples? Type away and let me know what your data looks like. If you have issues with the WooClap, make yourself known. Yell, wave, type in the chat box, do something, but make yourself known. I will give you maybe a couple minutes for this one. And this is not an examination, so no judgment for spelling mistakes or technical mistakes, no worries. You are in a friendly space here. Google Forms, surveys, computer logs, interesting. So numerical data, field notes and observations. Yes, I didn't mention field work, but you know what? Maybe this also counts as lab work, where your lab is the world. That's beautiful. Statistics of problems solved with your access. So statistics, that would be maybe Excel files or something, right? Yes. Standard psychological tests. Ooh, human psychology, I guess. So GDPR is a big thing for this one. Software artifacts, source code. Amazing. Political science, urban policy. So those are mostly texts, right? Yeah. Do we have some more? I will mute my microphone for a second because I need a drink and I don't want you to hear the big gulping sound that it makes. Ooh, I am a yoga teacher, actually. So who is studying philosophy, scriptures, books in the field of yoga? That is so cool. I'm actually passing my yoga. You are, hey, hi, Yoga Alliance teacher training in June. I'm passing my exam in June. So, and I'm presenting an essay on the Gita, on the Bhagavad Gita. It is a small world, right? Thank you, your access. Historical sources. Okay, so but that's also interesting because philosophy, scriptures, books, etc. are most likely numerical files that you analyze, but these scriptures, so by definition, they are secondary data because we don't have access to the original books. They have been translated or interpreted or compiled or something. So that's also interesting, an interesting kind of data. All right, thank you for this extra information. I will leave this question open so that if you think of something, you can type it in, but let's continue, right? Now, you know a little bit more about what data is, right? I would say that if we need to sum it up in one sentence, data is whatever information you feed into your research process. Does that sound good? Whatever fuels your research. Be it primary, secondary, quantitative, qualitative, numerical, physical, whatever. And despite the diversity of data types, we have some constant good habits that we can take on to be better researchers, to be better at research data management, and to produce more transparent research. But let's get into this. So data, as you can feel, is actually at the core of your research project. No data, no science. right? That makes sense. They enable the research process, right? And when I say science, I don't mean like science, like biology or chemistry, right? I mean, no data, no research. Let us just skip this division amongst people and call all of ourselves scientific, right? So no data, no science. They can support or disprove your hypotheses. They can help you bring nuance to your conclusions. They can contribute to the choice of methodology, right? If you have terabytes and gigabytes of data to analyze, it will take up more time and maybe more budget and maybe different resources that if you have 3 texts to compare, right? So it can have an impact on the timing of your project, on the budget of your project, on the methodology. It can be like at the source of your experimental design, right? They may also have an impact on the quality of your results. That's very easy to figure if you work with quantitative data. Data with big error bars will yield a certain level of certainty on your results, right? So that's one way. Data that has been, for example, filtered through many years and many translations. I'm thinking of the yoga manuscripts, for example. By definition, these are secondary data and they always ought to be taken with a grain of salt, right? And this grain of salt fits into the quality control of your data. And it may bring a different color, a different certainty, or a different approach to how we envision the result, right? And also, let's not forget that sometimes your data can carry economical value. That is a big one. And it's usually very surprising to most scientists because most of us have been scientifically brought up, right, in a culture of open science. You have always been told that open science, open access, open data is the way to go. That is true. It is the way to go. But sometimes science can also lead to patents, companies, valorization, commercial products, right? If that's the way you choose to go, that's really fine. But then your data, the data that is associated with whatever you are marketing, basically carries that economical value. And that ought to be taken into account in the data management process. Now, data management means basically every process your data goes through. At every step of the project, from the beginning to the execution, to the sharing, and to the, let's say, long-term strategy, archival strategy, maybe that's a good one. Let me help you visualize this. So research data lives through what we call the data life cycle. It is ideally a cycle because data is made to be used and reused, right? It takes effort, time, energy, money, resources to create a data set. Those of you who are taking field notes, working in the labs, collecting data yourselves, know what I'm talking about. It takes time and effort. This time and effort is invested into creating an object of scientific value. It is not made to die after the end of your PhD thesis. It is meant to continue living and to feed further research. And then those of you who have reused data from other projects now know what I'm talking about. And it's actually a single process, right? So data is created through fieldwork, through reuse or something, and then it gets processed. Processed, I would say, is everything you do to your data that is not analysis. Let's say, for example, it is stored, it is named, it is organized, it is cleaned up, filtered out. Maybe you have some aberrations or some outlying points that you filter out. That is not something that we should mess around with. It can be sampled, resampled, right? And then it gets through your analysis process. It can be a piece of code that you have written that you apply to your data, or it can be an analysis that consists of a comparison of various sources. It can be a comment, a description, an analysis, right? And this is where your scientific approach, your scientific method gets into action. Then you get results, and then those results get published. Sometimes along with your data, hopefully along with your data, right? So the publishing and the sharing is part of the data lifecycle. That's when you give access to your data to the rest of the community. Maybe not to everything, and maybe not at all, especially if you are working on a patent or on an invention or something. Okay, but then whether it is openly shared or not, you do not throw your data in the trash after the end of your thesis, right? So it needs to be preserved. There's data preservation. Maybe some of you are towards the end of your PhD thesis, so maybe your supervisor has already asked you to supervise a master student, right? I know that happens. And well, you want this master student to be able to use your data, and maybe the next master student, or maybe when you go abroad for your postdoc in your dream university, maybe your data stays at the university where you did your PhD and someone needs to be reusing them, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, right? And it is up to you to make sure that this is possible. Otherwise, all the effort you have put into creating your data slightly goes to waste. And we don't want to waste even slightly any of this effort. And then data can be reused. So that's why it's a cycle, because we don't want data to die after the end of the project, okay? Now, responsible data management is tweaking all these steps of the data lifecycle to turn them into good habits for each of these tasks, right? So that data gets easier for you to use, but also easier for anyone else to reuse, okay? Now, I wanna like try and organize this in a more table of content-y kind of way. So as you can see, there is a cycle, and you can tell that the data creation step arrives at the beginning of a project, most likely, and the processing and analysis more during the execution of the project. In this case, for you, it would be a PhD thesis, right? And then towards the end of the project, data sharing. And at each of these steps, we can ask ourselves the questions, how can I do this better? For example, on the data creation step, we can stop and think about what our data looks like. How much of it do we have? What volume? What are the applicable regulations? Who do they belong to? Are they 100% mine? Am I reusing them? Do I have access? Where am I storing them? Data management planning, basically. And then during the execution phase of the project itself, every time you shut off your computer and go back home after the end of a work day, what happens to your data? They are stored, they're safe, they're secured, maybe they're backed up, maybe you have jotted down a few notes about what you have done today so that when you come back tomorrow morning, you know where to start again. All this is data management, and all this is opportunities for us to take up good habits, to be better researchers. And then obviously the research sharing approach is very important in that scope as well. All right, and this is where we will discuss about fair data, licenses, and data sustainability, which were one of the topics that you were least familiar with. Okay, so be patient. It will come at the end of the presentation. Okay. So far, I would guess that you haven't learned anything new yet, or maybe nothing groundbreaking, right? You know that you have to use data. You know that data is at the core of your scientific project. This is not really striking for you, right? And of course, when I tell you that you can take up good habits on each of these steps to be better researchers, yeah, okay, that's a little bit self-explanatory. That's a little obvious. Of course, I want to be the best researcher I can be. So what am I going to learn today? Like, what is the added value for my career? Okay, now, data management, we are only discussing data management here in the context of a scientific project, but it is a transferable skill, right? Because science is not the only thing that uses data, okay? Private companies use data a lot. Everything is data-driven in the world we live in today, right? Even social media, even journalism, anything that you can think of is probably data-driven. So if you can apply all these good habits in your scientific project, you can probably transfer them in another area of work, okay? So this is a good skill for you today. But my point today is not to make you gain a transferable skill, is to make you a better researcher, okay? And why would this make you a better researcher? Why would it be important for you to be good at research data management? Well, It has something to do with research quality, okay? Good habits in research data management. First of all, make your data easier to reuse for anyone else. It makes your data safer and more secure. So that's actually a good thing for you as well, right? Maybe you have a data disaster story that you can share during the break where your nephew spilled tea all over your hard drive, or where you flew to a conference abroad and your luggage with your hard drive was lost and you figured that all your data was lost forever. Or maybe, I don't know, you have had this leak of information on confidential data, right? So all of this is part of your work as a data manager. It also makes it compliant to rules and regulations. Maybe you are subject to rules and regulations that you are not even aware of. So that's a really interesting point that we will talk about maybe in, I think, 20 or 25 minutes. And in summary, good data management is the basis of scientific reproducibility. And we need to know what scientific reproducibility is, okay? Now, some of you did check that scientific reproducibility was something you were already familiar with, and that's great. But I still want to go through a few slides about data reproducibility, why it is so important, why it matters so much, or why it should matter to you as a scientist, and also to scientists as a community, right, as a whole, and why it is connected to research data management. Okay, let's get into it. I'm just gonna quit the WooClap questions so that you are not distracted, because this is a very big one. All right. Scientific reproducibility. It is the possibility for something that gets published to continue living after it is published. What do I mean by that? It means that something that is published and that is reproducible, usually a scientific result or a paper, right? It can be verified, it can be replicated, it can be built upon, you can widen it, you can continue it, you can use it as input for further research. So scientific reproducibility is what brings life to a scientific research, okay? If your research, in other words, is not reproducible, it will die on a shelf and gather dust forever. It will not be able to be used by another scientific community, by a fellow student, by a fellow scientist, okay? And scientific reproducibility is applicable to results, but also to data, to methods, to conclusions. Anything that you can produce as a scientist needs to be reproducible, okay? You can think about it in the, I want to say, ethics point of view. Something that needs to be, stuff needs to be reproducible, because otherwise it cannot be, the quality of the result cannot be assessed properly, right? In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to check the reproducibility of the results that we use as inputs, but we do not live in an ideal world, right? So that's why scientific reproducibility is important. And then you can also think about it in the economics point of view, right? Science costs money. Science produces results and data. If the results and data are not reproducible, if they cannot be reused, then the money that we put in the science in the first place has gone to waste, because the result is not an end in itself. It should be seen actually as the added value that the project has brought to the scientific discipline, okay? Now, this is a big one, and this is something that I really want to nail into our head today. So I would like you to look at this video that is actually it was based on a TED Talk about scientific reproducibility. It's very short, it's like 5 minutes. I'm going to play it for you. And I want you to listen and look to the video. So the video tells you about scientific reproducibility, what it is, so that you already know, we just talked about it. And I'm talking in a theoretical way here, but this video goes into the practicals of scientific reproducibility. Why is it so hard to produce reproducible research? Why is it such a challenge? Why is not all science reproducible by default? All right. Maybe you already know a little bit about those questions, but if you don't, or if you do anyway, please pay close attention to the video, and we'll talk about it right after the video, okay? I have checked the sound works, the image works, so it should be all good for you. Let me play it and see you in probably 6 minutes.
In 2011, a team of physicists reported a startling discovery. Neutrinos traveled faster than the speed of light by 60 billionths of a second in their 730-kilometer trip from Geneva to a detector in Italy. Despite 6 months of double-checking, the bizarre discovery refused to yield. But rather than celebrating a physics revolution, the researchers published a cautious paper arguing for continued research in an effort to explain the observed anomaly. In time, the error was tracked to a single incorrectly connected fiber optic cable. This example reminds us that real science is more than static textbooks. Instead, researchers around the world are continuously publishing their latest discoveries, with each paper adding to the scientific conversation. Published studies can motivate future research, inspire new products, and inform government policy. So it's important that we have confidence in the published results. If their conclusions are wrong, we risk time, resources, and even our health in the pursuit of false leads. When findings are significant, they are frequently double-checked by other researchers, either by reanalyzing the data or by redoing the entire experiment. For example, it took repeated investigation of the CERN data before the timing error was tracked down. Unfortunately, there are currently neither the resources nor professional incentives to double-check the more than 1 million scientific papers published annually. Even when papers are challenged, the results are not reassuring. Recent studies that examined dozens of published pharmaceutical papers managed to replicate the results of less than 25% of them, and similar results have been found in other scientific disciplines. There are a variety of sources for irreproducible results. Errors could hide in the original design, execution, or analysis of the data. Unknown factors such as patients' undisclosed condition in a medical study can produce results that are not repeatable in new test subjects. And sometimes, the second research group can't reproduce the original results simply because they don't know exactly what the original group did. However, some problems might stem from systematic decisions in how we do science. Researchers, the institutions that employ them, and the scientific journals that publish findings are expected to produce big results frequently. Important papers can advance careers, generate media interest, and secure essential funding, so there's slim motivation for researchers to challenge their own exciting results. In addition, little incentive exists to publish results unsupportive of the expected hypothesis. That results in a deluge of agreement between what was expected and what was found. In rare occasions, this can even lead to deliberate fabrication, such as in 2013 when a researcher spiked rabbit blood with human blood to give false evidence that his HIV vaccine was working. The publish or perish mindset can also compromise academic journals' traditional peer review processes, which are safety checks where experts examine submitted papers for potential shortcomings. The current system, which might involve only 1 or 2 reviewers, can be woefully ineffective. That was demonstrated in a 1998 study where 8 weaknesses were deliberately inserted into papers, but only around 25% were caught upon review. Many scientists are working toward improving reproducibility in their fields. There's a push to make researchers' raw data, experimental procedures, and analytical techniques more openly available in order to ease replication efforts. The peer review process can also be strengthened to more efficiently weed out weak papers prior to publication. And we could temper the pressure to find big results by publishing more papers that fail to confirm the original hypothesis, an event that happens far more than current scientific literature suggests. Science always has and always will encounter some false starts as part of the collective acquisition of new knowledge. Finding ways to improve the reproducibility of our results can help us weed out those false starts more effectively, keeping us moving steadily toward exciting new discoveries.
Thank you for watching. Someone in the chat is asking for the link. I would be happy to provide the link, but I can do you one better. I can make sure that the organizers help me send you the slideshow, if that's something that Albina would be okay with, and you will get the link through the slideshow. Maybe we could do that. Maybe I'll discuss it during the break with the Euraccess organizers. What do you think, Albina? Can we send them the slideshow afterwards?
Yes, of course, of course.
Amazing. Then you will get the link, if that's okay for you.
Yes.
Amazing, thank you. Now, this video. So scientific reproducibility is the possibility of a study to be replicated, reused, verified. It's important because, according to the video, it leads to new science. That's what we talked about, right? That's how you make sure your publication keeps on living after it's published. Then there was also the image with the carnivorous plant being fed an innovative food, and then growing chaotically and eating up the White House, right? So science leads to innovation, products that go on the market, go into people's homes, bodies, whatever. And it also can lead to political decisions, right? We have had a massive example of this in the last 2 years, why scientific research is of utmost importance in political decisions, okay? So it is important that scientific results are trustworthy. And by trustworthy, we mean, among others, reproducible. Now, why is it so hard to make reproducible research? Did anyone get anything from this video? Maybe I have a very specific question and I would like you to try and answer it in the chat box. What do we call the culture that pressures scientists to publish? And that is one of the biggest threats to scientific reproducibility. Did you get that word? Did you get that expression? The expression that the name of the culture that we have to navigate as scientists? Yes, Priscilla, very good. Anyone else? Well, I guess you can, and yeah, you send it to everyone, great. So everyone can see in the chat, publish or perish. As scientists, you are submitted to a tremendous pressure to publish a lot of paper quickly and spectacularly. We want new results and we want a lot of them, okay? And this is actually how, most often, how we measure the quality of a scientific career. This is how we evaluate you as a scientist, as a researcher, actually. And by evaluate, I mean that the number and the impact of the papers that you publish is usually part of your evaluation criteria for grant applications or for career evaluations. Maybe if you are on a tenure track or something like that, that's important for the evaluators, okay? So that's the publish or perish mentality. And the pressure to publish may push us away from reproducible science because it leads to precipitation, because it leads to lack of verification, and also sometimes consciously or unconsciously towards the gray area of fraud. Now we will talk about scientific fraud and that gray area in the second part of the presentation. But now you need to understand that publish or perish is the enemy of scientific reproducibility, okay? The reproducibility crisis that we have been facing for the past, let's say, 2 or 3 decades is not a view of the mind. It's something that is really measurable. There was this article in 2016, for example, in Nature, where 1,500 scientists were polled and asked, among other questions, have you failed to reproduce an experiment? Look at the result. We are very scarcely under the 50% mark, even if we are asking scientists if they were able to reproduce their own research, okay? So it means that on average, more than half the scientific papers that get published are irreproducible. Now, bear in mind, irreproducible research brings virtually no added value to the scientific community. Okay, so that's a waste of effort, a waste of good knowledge, and a waste of science money, right? Now, I'm not saying, of course, that all scientists have become bad scientists. Actually, the opposite is true. It has never been easier to make good, excellent science because we have more and more techniques and technology and an ever-increasing understanding, of analysis methods that bring amazing results. So it's not a question of skills, it's a question of context. If you take excellent scientists and you put them under this tremendous pressure to publish, mistakes will be made. Failure, so I am looking at the chat, right? Failure might just occur because of lack of time. That's part of the pressure. We have lack of time because we are expected to publish a good thesis in 4 years, publish a paper in the first couple of years of your thesis, to publish 3 papers because we really need to apply to this grant in 3 years. So this pressure that you get on publication can also radiate in other spheres of your work, right? Pressure to get this or that position, pressure to apply to this or that grant, right? I am confident that each of you has already had first-hand experience of this competitivity that this system instills between research, okay? And making irreproducible science means not sharing enough, not being transparent enough about what you have done, sharing only part of the truth, okay? We'll dig really deeper into how to make reproducible research later on, but irreproducible research is the enemy, publish or perish is the enemy of irreproducible research, okay? Most scientific results today, more than half, according to the poll in Nature 6 years ago, are difficult or impossible to replicate. Now, this is not like, not everything is doomed, okay? This sounds all very negative, but I swear that there are some stuff we can do to work on these, to try and circumvent, to try and navigate this context. This issue stems from the context, the publish or perish context, right? We do not, by pressuring scientists to publish, we do not favor scientific reproducibility. Instead, we favor lack of quality, lack of precision, lack of transparency, lack of integrity in scientific publishing, okay? Now, this is not a decrease in skills, but it's a cultural phenomenon. And I am not the first one to say this, obviously, right? This is nothing new. It has been going on for decades, and more stakeholders in the scientific world are becoming more aware of that. The funding agencies, the universities, the research institutions, the labs, the scientists themselves, the editorial offices, the journals, the students even may be aware of that. So this cultural change is getting into motion, and by being here today, you are part of this cultural change, and you can be part of this machine that will work towards better science. So thank you for being here. And also, now that you know why research data management matters because of reproducibility, I hope that you keep in mind why you are here today. And as Rumiana very wisely told us, pressure of any sort is something that we, usually should avoid, okay? Now, I know that if your supervisor wants you to publish a paper within 2 years, it's going to seem absolutely impossible to tell them, no, I need more time, okay? But maybe today I bring you a few pieces of leverage that you can use to bring to their attention that precipitation disfavors quality, okay? And it's never a good idea to publish something we are not 100% sure of, okay? Because this can have very bad repercussions. I am getting ahead of myself. This topic is too rich and too interesting. We need to continue working, okay? So today I will try and bring to light how research data management good habits can help you make more reproducible research. And yes, choosing the format of your data, choosing how you organize your folders, where do you store your data, where do you back them up, all these very small and mundane questions that seem really boring are actually the first step towards reproducible science, okay? Reproducibility, there is a typo that's going on. I will fix the reproducibility typo before I send out the slideshow. Okay, sorry about that. But reproducibility is based on traceability and reusability of data. And all of these can be linked to research data management. Okay, makes sense for everyone? Now, before we go back to the data lifecycle and sort of walk through it and see what we can do at each step to become better scientists, I want to make sure that you know what a data management plan is. So today's training is not about making a data management plan. It's about research data management in general. But after this training, when you are able to ask yourselves the right question during your research data management daily life, right? You can use a data management plan to sort of list the answers to these questions. So a data management plan basically it's a set of questions, okay? Usually it's a web-based document, but it can also be a simple notebook or a Word document, however you like it. It's sort of a checklist of attention points to guide the researcher through the data lifecycle. At the bottom of this box, which you will get, keep in mind, you will get all the resources after the class. You will get links to the Data Curation Center pages or stack of resources about planning your data. And so basically you will get like list of questions like to ask yourselves before, during and after a research project, and you will get templates. And so these lists of questions are really, really good tools. Sometimes some funding agencies may require a data management plan as a selection criteria for the grant. But if you are not in that case, you can still use a data management plan just for yourself. And it's also something that lives along with the project. Okay, so it's basically like a memorandum, okay, of research data management. Now, at the University of Liège and in most Belgian universities, we have a tool that's dmponline.be. I know that in France, they use DMP Opidor. You can use the DCC resources for free, okay? And this is usually a list of questions that looks like this. So you can see in the slide, for example, I took a snippet of one of my data management plans templates. What is the purpose of the data? What type of data? What is the format? Community standards, size? Are you reusing existing data? Quality control? So there is a whole list of usually dozens of questions to help you plan your data. Okay. Again, this is just a little plus that I'm giving you. This is not about how to make a data management plan today, but it exists. And if you're interested in that, it's worth digging a little deeper. Okay. Quick question. I would like to know if you have filled in a DMP for your PhD thesis. Have you filled in a DMP? Yes, because you had to, yet because you wanted to, but it wasn't mandatory, or no? Can you please go back to the WOOC lab and let me know if you have filled in a DMP? Data management plan. No. Okay. Most of you are clicking no. Okay. It means that you will most likely learn something new today. So that's good news. Okay, so nearly all of you are checking no. Thank you. I will make a short question break at the moment. So we have only talked about the introduction at the moment. I know it's already been an hour, but I'm in timing, no worries. So reproducibility, the link between reproducibility and data management, why it matters, what is the reproducibility crisis, and how do we define research data and the data lifecycle. And we've also gotten to know each other a little more, and we have made sure that the WOOC lab works. Does anyone have any question at this moment? If you have questions, you can type them in the chat box, or if that's okay with Albina, you can use the raise hand button. There's you go into the reaction button at the bottom of the Zoom window. You can click on raise hand, and then you can, with the go of the technical assistance, you can turn on your microphone and talk to me. You have like 10 seconds to come up with a question. If you don't have any, we move forward, no problem. But I will shut up my microphone again because I need another gulp of water. Thank you, Brigitte, for the resource. I can go back to the slide and already send you the website of the Data Curation Center. I'm not a big fan of providing resources during the presentation, because I think it can be distracting to you, but you know what, it can also be helpful. So, question break. Okay, we good? I'm happy. Maybe you are all clear on everything we just said. Maybe you're a little sleepy. Okay. So if that's okay for you, we continue moving forward. Don't worry, we will have a break at some point. Okay, no worries. While we are talking about data planning, so there's the data management plan that you can use at any point of your research project. Planning isn't something you do only at the beginning of a project, right? Planning is a living thing. The same for a data management planning. And in the data management plan, most questions or many questions are actually relating to applicable rules and regulations, because many of the choices that we are going to make regarding our research data management tools actually have roots in applicable rules and regulations. So being aware of these rules and regulations is always a good idea. I am not a legal specialist, but I can bring awareness to you. I can bring to light the most common rules and regulations that you are most likely to encounter. Okay. Now, I would like to do this in the form of a little game. I have on the WooC Lab, I will launch the question right away. I have a list of case studies, a list of projects that are subject to rules and regulations. I would like you to tell me which of the regulations on the right part of the screen do you think apply to the 5 case studies? So you can see the mix and match exercise on the WooC Lab. Try to connect the dots that you think go together, and then we will discuss them after in the slideshow. I will give you maybe 1 or 2 minutes to fill in this exercise so that you can have the time to read all the case studies. And I see that we have a question. So while you work, I will try and address the question. Nowadays, the ideas are precious in science. However, sometimes the problem is how to protect your ideas. That's a big one. Protecting your idea and at the same time being reproducible and transparent is the dilemma of scientific reproducibility. And that's actually the whole, I want to say, topic of fair data. So I will save your question for chapter 3. No, chapter 1. Fair data is chapter 1, right? Yes. So I will save your question for maybe in, I don't know, 12 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, if that's okay, Annie. Thank you. Okay, so one person has entered an answer. A history researcher collects representations of the Pope through the ages. No problem, Annie. Which regulation do you think apply to this history researcher? Gdpr, Nagoya, IPR? If you don't know what Nagoya is, that's the point, actually. We're supposed to discover it after the exercise. PhD student takes videos of volunteers. Which regulation are they subject to? Okay. Maybe 1 more minute. Okay, I can see that more people are answering. Okay, I am looking at your answers, but you cannot see each other's answers. So I will display the right answer in 30 seconds. Keep playing in the meantime. Oh, by the way, all of these are anonymous. So I do not see who is typing what. So don't worry, make mistakes. Nobody cares. Okay. Let's discuss the results, okay? So if you are a history researcher that is collecting representation of the Pope through the ages, you may be subject to copyright laws, intellectual property laws, and regulations. Basically, if you are using works of art, or if you're using data from someone else, you may be subject to copyright laws, okay? If you are studying arts, art pieces, artifacts, something, you may want to give a call to your local legal department because it is likely that studying is okay, but publishing the data is not okay, to keep things super schematic and super simple, okay? As I'm mentioning again, I'm not a legal specialist, but this is the essential of how it goes, okay? Most copyright and IPR laws makes it possible for you to do science on the things, but not to publish the things themselves, okay? If you are reusing data, of course, you know about the citation ethics. You are most likely familiar with scientific citation, but if you are publishing your data along with your results, you may want to give the license a read, okay? Copyright is a thing even in science. Sometimes it can be surprising, but it's a thing, okay? Now, GDPR, ooh, that's a massive one. If you are working in Europe, or if you are working with European partners or on European human subjects, okay, you are subject to general data protection regulations. It's a set of obligations that enforce the protection of subjects, of people, actually, people's privacy. GDPR is why you have to accept cookies on the Euraccess website. It's why you have to click on many boxes when you are navigating online. And it's also why, as a scientist, if you are collecting data on a human subject, they have to fill in many forms, and you actually have to provide those forms. This is not technically your own job. There should be someone at your research institution that can help you with that, either a data protection officer or the legal department or someone in the ethics committee. But basically, as soon as your research is remotely connected to human subjects, you are subject to GDPR. It means that you have a few obligations that you have to fill in. The forms when you're collecting the data, you cannot store the data anywhere. You are responsible for its security and for the protection of intruders on data. Okay, so this is why it's important to be aware of GDPR. So if you are studying psychology, and even if you are collecting 100 anonymous polls, you may still be subject to GDPR, because anonymity, good anonymity, is the only protection to GDPR. But you would be surprised what anonymous actually means when it comes to scientific data. So using a pseudonym is not the same thing as being anonymous. And even if you don't have the name of someone, but you have data that can be traced back to that someone, like an IP address, for example, or like gender, age, and I don't know, postcode or anything, that's still sensitive personal data. All right, so GDPR, a big one. It's better to give one phone call too many to your legal department than to forget to do it, okay? So my advice is ask if you're not sure. The Nagoya protocol is a set of obligations that you are subject to if you work with genetic material from basically developing countries. So it's a protocol that makes sure we cannot go to developing countries and sort of pillage their biological resources without any return to the origin country. Okay, so that's also a very important one. Let's say you are studying vegetation from the Amazonia, or lion's blood from Africa, or anything, any genetic material that had to circulate from somewhere to your lab, you are likely subject to Nagoya, all right? And then if you are working with data that is not technically human, but still private, you are still most likely subject to a confidentiality agreement. Maybe to collect the data that you have, that you are working on, you have had to sign a confidentiality agreement or an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, most likely if you're working in economical science or in business science. One good piece of advice is usually not to sign anything without the opinion of your legal department, or at least, at the very, very least, the opinion of your supervisor, obviously. So all these regulations, actually, they're not just boxes to tick. They are sets of obligations that you have to observe in your data management, okay? So if you are collecting human data, there are things that you have to make sure does not happen to your data. If you are signing an NDA, for example, make sure that you protect your data against violating the NDA, even unconsciously, okay? Same goes for when you are sharing data. Can you share everything if you have signed an NDA? Can you share the results from Gdpr obtained data? That's good questions, okay? And it depends actually on each and every situation. Okay, there's not like one magic recipe for all the Gdpr data or for all the Nagoya data. Okay, now you have heard at least today about these regulations, and when in doubt, give a call to your local legal department. Okay, I see that I have a question in the chat, but I will just finish off the part about the regulations. So GDPR is about human data, all right? And so it means that if you are collecting human data, you have to provide a good legal basis. You have to have an excellent reason to collect human data. And that is what your data protection officer or your legal department can help you do, okay? It's a little bit boring, right? All those applications, applicable rules and regulations. So let's not dwell on the subject. Now you have heard about them and you know that you should be mindful of them. In some specific disciplines, there may be not technically regulations or rules or laws, but codes of conduct and sensible precautions that you have to take into account. For example, if you're using energy consumption data or geographical data, I mean, if you are taking aerial pictures of Amazonia, for example, and then publish them online, there may be consequences to that, okay? So it's still a good thing to take a pace and think about what could be done with the information that you are putting out there, okay? And I know that this is very paradoxical because sometimes we want to be as open as possible, but we also have to be as close as necessary, okay? So in case of these, of course, if it's human data, road safety data, electronic communication data, we may also be touching with GDPR, but even if you are GDPR proof, there still may be some things that you want to take into account. Okay, so my general advice for this section is talk to your local legal affairs department. Most likely there are specialists that can help you deal with the legal aspects of your research. Okay. Now we have another question break, and I see that I have a question in the chat. Does the Nagoya protocol also apply to human genetic materials? Yes, it does, but it's usually weaker than GDPR. Okay, so most European countries, most I don't know about. I know that it's a European law, and there are other privacy laws in the US that I'm aware of. For the rest of the world, I'm not sure. But most likely the GDPR regulations, if you are subject to them, are stronger than the Nagoya protocol. It means that they're more restrictive and that if you are GDPR compliant, then by default, you will be Nagoya compliant. But Nagoya so applies to any genetic materials. So human, plants, animals, mushrooms, fungi, you name it. Other questions about rules and regulations, bearing in mind that I am but a humble scientist, not a legal specialist. Otherwise, we will continue to the fairness spectrum. So, okay, great. We have Agustina that is giving me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Is it a thumbs up because you are happy about what you heard, or is it a thumbs up because you have a question and you want to talk? If you want to talk, feel free to talk. Agustina, sorry, I said Agustina, my bad. It's hard being the first one to talk, I understand. So don't worry. Matteo, you have a raised hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Okay, hi. Thank you for the talk so far. So I have a question regarding the GDPR in case where an experiment needs to gather data from humans in terms of like software usage of the software, basically. Which are, let's say, a set of steps you would suggest to take into consideration for this?
Okay, good question. For applied sciences and engineering, usually we are subject to GDPR without even knowing it. Like if we are tracing software usage, as you say, or just pings of devices on the network or something, this is already GDPR related data. So what I would suggest is first, contact your legal department with a clear explanation of everything that you want to collect in terms of information. And you have to make sure that you're able to tell them what you want in very clear terms, and then they can pinpoint you to the right thing to do. The right thing to do may be to inform the subjects that you are collecting their data. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the specific situation. It may be to claim the rights of access the right to access this data based on a strong legal basis. Now, there are 6 possible legal bases for human data collection. I don't remember all of them. One of them is consent. That's the one that you give when you click on accepting the cookies, but it shouldn't be the first one we go to as scientists. There's the legal basis of public security. There's the legal basis of public interest. That's the one we usually go to when we work in a research project. But again, this is just from my general culture of legal science of GDPR. And you should definitely, the first step is definitely to lay out everything you need as information and bring that document to your legal department. And they will most likely tell you exactly what you need to do. Do you need to, when you collect data, do you need to print out forms and have your subjects sign forms? They will know. Do you need to store them in a locked cupboard on an actual physical server dedicated to this data only? They will let you know. But these are all the things that you may be required to do. Most likely, it will only be because you are mentioning software usage data. So most likely you will only be required, that's my humble opinion again, but most likely you will be only required to make it super anonymous, which means no way of tracking any device to anyone. For example, maybe you will only be able to link one device to a certain usage, but without having its IP address or something. So anything that can be used to trace back to someone, if it can be dumped, it will be dumped. So the idea is to make sure that you can do your science with the least information possible. And this is why we actually need the legal guys, because we need to bring the balance between I want all the information, but I cannot have it all.
Yeah, thank you a lot. Maybe just a follow-up question. You mentioned many times the legal department. Maybe does it have different names under different universities? I don't know. For this.
Usually there is if you are working in a European university, there is most likely a data protection officer. Maybe, so that's the name they are given. Maybe there's so that's the data protection officer. There may be someone who's called like a research data officer or data specialist or a data steward. Anyone that works in a central office, or it can even be in faculties actually, with data in the title is likely to be able to help. So in Liège, for example, we have a legal affairs department, we have a data protection officer, and the research data officer, that would be me. So these 3 people would be the ones to go to. Now, most universities have a legal department. These are also the guys that we go to when we have to sign contracts, for example. But yes, I hope that you can find your way in the mechanisms of your institution.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Other question? Hasida, hi.
Hi, Judith. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So my question is regarding an incident that happened, and I don't know if I have time, but I'll try to keep it short. So a person from the US, from one of the reputed universities, came to our institute, and very coincidentally, I work in a yoga institute, and here we don't have a data protection officer. In fact, it's a very small setup where we do our research also related to yoga. So this person, he came and he had chosen our institute as the research site, and he had good connections within the institute. He collected a lot of data. Psychological data was huge, biochemical and biological, even genetic level data that this person collected was huge. And some of the data was transferred back to the lab in the US so that it could be analyzed properly. A lot of it was analyzed here. So now there is, we don't hear from that person. Some of us here in the institute were supposed to be co-investigators in that project. But right now, nothing of that is happening. And what I got to know internally was that the ethical clearance was also not, it was pending because of certain questions which were not answered to the satisfaction of the ethical committee here. So, and I am supposed to be one of the co-investigators in the project, but I don't know where I stand right now. My area of specialization is psychology. And other colleagues here helped collect the physiological, biological data. So how are we supposed to deal with this, considering that the data protection law in India is not that strict? In fact, I was just checking up on the internet, and just recently they have introduced something. So do you have any suggestions?
Well, this is actually bigger than just GDPR. This is an ethics issue. So this person who came, collected data, promises were sort of made because usually to get access to data in a specific environment, an institution, a natural reserve, whatever, you have to have clearance to make research in that area. And the clearance usually implies that you will have to have a fair return on the institution that is giving the data, and you are not being provided with your fair return. Now, this is an issue that I would definitely bring up with an ethics board, if you have any. The ethics board of both institutions actually maybe should be should be involved into these discussions. So I think that if reaching to that person is not an option, trying to reason with them and talk to them in an open and transparent manner, because they need to know that they need to provide the return on investment from your institution. The investment was providing the data. Then the ethics board of those two universities should get in touch with each other. That would be my advice. Because that's not only a legal violation, that's like there is an even more superficial layer of obligation here that was ethical, that has not been respected. So I would go about it through the ethics committees.
Okay. I have one more quick question related to your answer. May I ask?
Sure.
Thank you. The justification that this person would give is the huge investment that the person has done for upgrading the lab at our institute. And this is out of his personal finances. Probably some of it has come from the university finances. And those equipments are here in the lab. So that person can always say that I have invested in the lab, I have upgraded the lab. And so that is my return to the institute for collecting the data. Of course, the promises that were made to me and my colleagues have not been met, and the data also has not been shared. And I doubt whether this person has ethical clearance from our institute, because that's what I got to know internally, although this is a little hushed up here. So yes, that's where it stands.
Okay. Well, this is a data management seminar. Okay, so I'm a specialist in data management, not in legal, ethical issues. But if this person had access to data through a research clearance that they signed in their own name or in the name of an institution, the terms of the clearance should be respected. And if the terms of the clearance stated that you should be co-investigator, then you should be co-investigator. So my advice remains the same. The clearance should be respected. And if there is a misrespect of that clearance, we should involve ethical boards on both sides. So, but yeah, I'm afraid that this is far beyond my scope of expertise, but I could give you like this advice based on experience, but not based on expertise. I hope that's enough.
Yes, thank you so much. I think at least that clears some of the doubts that I had. Thanks a lot, Julie.
My pleasure, and I hope the matter gets solved. I really hope.
Yes, thank you. Me too.
All right. Shall we continue? Are we good? Do we have? If you have another burning question, even after the question break, you can type it into the chat box. I will keep an eye on the chat box. Okay. The data fairness spectrum. Are we clear to move forward? I don't see any more raised hands. Let me scroll through the participants. No, okay. Okay, good. All right, so as you can see from those discussions we just had about rules and regulations, sometimes we need to be as open, no, actually most of the time we need to be as open as possible. Reproducibility, right? We need to be transparent and to share as much as possible. But we also need to be as closed as necessary. Some data is too sensitive to be openly shared into the world. Sometimes you have signed documents, agreements, permits that prevent you from publishing all of your data, okay? So open data should be the destination. It should be the general aim. But the destination, like the horizon, is sometimes a little bit unrealistic. So it is sort of the destination that you need to want to reach, but maybe that you cannot reach. So what do? Do you just give up on everything and do you just not share anything? Obviously not. There's a whole spectrum of openness of data that you can try and position your research on. And that spectrum is called the data fairness spectrum. Now, this is a very European approach, very European-centric approach, to be really honest. This is the Euraccess network after all. But the fair data principles were sort of, I want to say invented, but let's say formalized to be more correct, by European funding agencies, by the European Research Council, and most specifically in the scope of the Horizon program, Horizon 2020, which actually is fast now, and now Horizon Europe, which is the new research funding program. Now, the data fairness spectrum is a tool that will help us be as open as possible and as close as necessary. Open data is the destination because it facilitates reproducibility, facilitates collaborations, obviously, right? The more visibility you get, the most likely it is that people will contact you after reading your paper and maybe even sparkling a collaboration, okay? As I just mentioned, European funding agencies are very sensitive to data openness and data fairness, and actually open data is most likely to become the default setting of data sharing in future investment programs. So it will have to be done anyway, so let's just be proactive about it and be able to do it beforehand. And open data actually ensures data sustainability, because if you put your data out into the world, you have most likely taken care of the sustainability of its format, of its documentation, and everything beforehand. So it's also a good drive for you to make sustainable data. Sustainable when I mean like over 5 or 10 years, okay? So also open data, contrary to what we might instinctively think, open data yields actually more to investors because it optimizes return on investment. Producing data costs your time, your energy, and your knowledge. So we want that data to yield return on that investment of your time, your energy, and your knowledge. And you are most likely, your research or part of your research is most likely funded, and even more likely if you're in Europe, by a public funder. So return on public investment is a good idea as well. So it is not always possible to share data openly because of applicable rules, and regulations. And also remember, like maybe half an hour ago, we mentioned that sometimes data carries economical value. If you think that your data can yield to a result that might be the object of a patent or the object of a spin-off or of commercial use, maybe you want to wait a little bit before you share everything openly. Okay, so these are the reasons why we need to be as closed as necessary. And the fair data spectrum will help us position ourselves in between those two extremes. One extreme being open data, the other extreme being data cannot be shared, either for legal reasons or for strategic reasons. Okay, I just want to take 1 second here to tell you that good research data management habits are not only for data reuse. You should not care about your data only because you're going to put it out in the world. You should care about your data for yourself, because it's also nice to be a good researcher only for yourself. Okay, but let's go back to the sharing discussion here. The fair data spectrum will help you position your data in the as closed as necessary, as open as possible spectrum. Okay, now fair obviously is a word. Okay, it's a 4-letter word, but it's also an acronym. Okay, what does it stand for? It stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So if your data cannot be open, at least it needs to be as findable as possible, as accessible as possible. You get it. Okay. What does findable mean? It means that your data can be discoverable by both humans and computers. It means that if someone goes into their favorite database and types whichever keywords are linked to your research, they should be able to find your data set if you have shared it in a fair manner. Okay. Now, I just mentioned 2 important words here, databases and keywords. So when you choose to publish your data set, if you do so on a structured data repository, you will most likely have to fill in metadata information. Metadata is basically any overhead information on the data file that you are sharing. You are most likely familiar with metadata in the scope of research papers. My favorite database, for example, for papers is the Archive Astrophysics database. And if I type galactic halo, say, as keywords in the database, I will encounter this paper. Why? Because it has filled in the metadata in a very proper manner. So the metadata is the publication date, the archive ID, the BIP code, the keywords, astrophysics, high energy, blah, blah, blah. The abstract, the authors, the date. Okay, so all this is metadata, and the data would be the paper itself. Well, you can publish paper on databases, and you can publish data sets on databases. There is a very well-known database that is Zenodo, right? Some of you may already have published things on Zenodo or downloaded files from Zenodo. There are also disciplinary databases that you most likely know much better than I do. But when you deposit a file on an open database like Zenodo, you have to fill in so much information about the file, and all this information is the metadata. And the metadata is actually the first step towards fair data, because it ensures the findability of your data. Okay, so the metadata is basically the tag that goes on the file, on the folders of files that you are publishing. Okay, so your name, the date, the keywords, the production date, where to find them. Okay, so where to find them would be the digital object identifier, okay, DOI, or any other means of single identification. Okay, a link basically to the file. And all of these are automatically provided by the database if you are using a database. Okay, if you're not using a data repository, then you may want to create your metadata in some other way. But the most straightforward way to have metadata associated to something that you are publishing is by using a dedicated data repository. There's Zenodo, there's Figshare, which is actually part of an editorial house, so maybe not so good. There's Open Science Framework. There's maybe your institution has a data repository, like a Dataverse or a Pure portal. Maybe you have knowledge of disciplinary databases, like I used, for example, the Hubble Space Telescope database, which means I used images from the Hubble Space Telescope's camera, because there's more of them, cameras. Okay, so this is one of the databases that you can navigate using metadata. Okay, so metadata basically is what makes your data findable. Okay, I know it sounds a little bit random, but metadata is really the first step towards reproducibility. It's that easy, okay? So I can see your question, Presida. In most, I just want to highlight here that in most cases, okay, so let's go back to the spectrum. In most cases, at least the metadata can be shared. Let's say you have a file with people's names and genetic conditions, for example. That cannot be shared. Obviously, that's not GDPR compliant. But you can publish on Zenodo an empty entry, for example, with only the metadata of your research. So basically what you are saying on Zenodo is, I have this information at my disposal. It was published on this date by this person in this institution. And what you are doing is essentially planting a flag on that knowledge. Okay, but you are not putting the file out there because that would not be GDPR compliant. Now, if I am interested in whatever genetic condition you are researching and I type it in Zenodo and I see your address, your metadata, maybe I can contact you and then you get visibility and then reproducibility is ensured. Do you see what I mean by at least the metadata can be shared? Very important. So this is why fair data, the first step to fair data is metadata. Now, Presida, we have a question. What type of data can be published on Zenodo? Any type that is legally okay to be made open. So Zenodo is an open data repository, same as OSF, for example, Open Science Framework, which is the European Union data repository. There's also something called the European Open Science Cloud that will likely be launched in the next few months, okay? And the advantages of publishing on Zenodo are the same as the advantages on publishing anywhere else. That is visibility, as open as possible, as close as necessary. Now, Zenodo is the most mainstream one, so that's like probably the one that will provide you most visibility, but you also have to be strategic about it, okay? Strategic as in, does your scientific discipline often use Zenodo, or do they often use another repository? So that's also one of the questions that you should be asking yourselves before publishing, okay? So, fair data, F for findable, no problem, Presida. A for accessible, all right? So the data need to be made available in a sustainable way, but if you're using a data repository that's basically baked into the repository, the metadata are retrievable, and if the data cannot be shared, there have to be justifications. Justifications are usually embargo because of intellectual property or value transfer, that is patents or companies, or legal reasons. Those are the only and main two good reasons not to share data, okay? Usually a data repository checks most boxes, like Zenodo, for example. And then the I and the R are a little bit overlapping, but the I means interoperable. So it means that the documentation, for example, is in English, right? So no barrier of language, no barrier of software, so open formats as much as possible. Basically breaking as many barriers as possible. Financial, knowledge barrier, language barrier, technical barriers, all right? Interoperable, can be exchanged between many countries, etc., etc. And the holy grail of open data or fair data reusability. The data are sufficiently described and can be shared with as few restrictions as possible. Imagine you have just finished your PhD thesis, you have published 3 amazing papers on 2 data sets that are on Zenodo, and then you get a postdoc in Miami, and then you get postdocs and postdocs and postdocs, and you travel and you become these famous scientists. What if someone wants to use your data set from 10 years ago that is still on Zenodo? Maybe they will not be able to contact you because you will be so busy collecting your Nobel Prize, you will not have the time to answer your emails. They need to be able to reuse your data set on their own. So you need to have provided enough documentations ahead for your data to be reusable. With a license, we will talk about licenses that is as open as possible and the format that is as open as possible. I have seen the question. I will come to it in a few minutes. All right. So fairness spectrum. If you cannot practice open data right away, make sure that your data is at least fair. And also, let's be mindful of something. Fair data, open data, sorry, does not automatically mean good data or fair data. If you publish your data set on your personal web page, for example, it's very unlikely that anyone will ever be able to find it by using a search engine, for example, okay? And it's also very, very unlikely that you will be able to get metadata or a digital identifier for your data set. So it's nice to have them on your personal web page, that's fun, but also post them on the data repository. If you need to remember only one thing about this section is if you practice open data, use a data repository, okay? Now we have a question from Ammar Mechid. Can the researcher publish the research data on Zenodo, which when he gets it from government institutions? Actually, you should only publish the data on which you have 100% authorization to publish. And so anyway, at least you can, most often in 99% of the cases, you can at least publish metadata, okay? And if you are unsure about whether or not you can publish the files, then you cannot probably publish the files because you would be sure if you had ownership of the data. So reasons not to publish a file would be GDPR, would be legal. And part of the legal reasons could also be that you don't have the ownership of the data. If it's data that you have collected yourself through lab work, field work, I don't know, through any scientific work that you have done yourself, you can usually publish the data. It is true that in most cases, institutions have the ownership of the data, but you as the author keep the responsibility of your data. So it means that you can choose to publish it or not, okay? If you are funded by government money, especially in Europe, actually you are encouraged to publish your data. Now, if it's data that you get from a government database, for example, census data, or financial data that you get from a government database, then if you have signed a non-disclosure agreement or an access agreement to the data, check the terms of the agreement to make sure that you can publish them or not, okay? Zenodo is amazing, but you should only publish files of which you have complete ownership. So if you are working in a consortium with many scientists, make sure that everyone is okay with you publishing the data and with their names being associated to the data set. Okay? With great fairness comes great responsibility. Okay? You should be able to, you should be actually the owner of the data that you publish, or at least you should have part of the ownership. My pleasure. Now, a license, usually with data repositories, there's a license that comes along with it. A license is a set of definitions that define how to reuse the data or how the data you publish can be reused. One of the most common licenses, with no pun intended, is the Creative Commons license. That's the license of the Wikipedia articles, okay? And you can use a license to protect your data from being reused in ways you don't like. For example, if you publish a data set, but you don't really want anyone to be able to download it and make money out of it, then you can use the non-commercial CC by NC, can you see here on the middle of the spectrum, license, okay? Now, a license is not something that you should be writing yourself. There are plenty of licenses out there, and if you are familiar with open software or open source coding, you are probably most likely with the GNU public license, the general public license, maybe the CC license even, okay? And so basically, when you use a data repository, you usually get to choose between 1 or 2 licenses. The CC BY is usually the most common license in open data practices, but there may be good reasons for you to maybe not be super happy about someone making money out of your data set. So you may want to use the BY and C, okay? Now, the license may also come with the publication through the editor if you are publishing your data set along with the paper. Now, I would not advise to publish your data set only on the editor's website if you are publishing your data along with the paper, because what you are essentially doing then is outsourcing the management of your data. And that's not always a good thing, okay? Because the editor's website may crash, or it may be relocated, or something may change, and you may sort of lose the grasp of your data. So it's okay to share. It's okay to share the data on the entry of the paper that you have published with the data, but then as a complement, maybe still create a Zenodo entry. Okay. Be mindful of editors. Editors are not your friends in general. Don't tell them I said that. What is the full form of CC BY? By full form, you mean the full text. Go to Wikipedia and type in Creative Commons licenses, and you will have all the texts. All right. But the CC BY license is basically the open data license. No restriction whatsoever. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a sequential approach to data sharing. Your data should be well managed. If it is well managed, it should be fair. And if it is fair on an open data platform, then you are in the sweet spot at the intersection of those 3 circles. But it is also possible to have open data that is of poor quality, or that is fraudulent, or that is not fair, okay? And this is the data that you want to avoid as a user and as a creator, okay? So if you are downloading data from an open database without any indication of fairness data, be mindful, all right? So fair data is the bridge between as open as possible and as closed as necessary. The FAIR principles are the ones you should keep in mind when devising a sharing strategy. Again, you will get the slideshow, okay? So no worries if you don't know, if you haven't like memorized all the FAIR principles, but they are selection criteria for most European funding agencies, so you can find them over there as well, okay? And now for the rest of the presentation, I would like to give you concrete examples of what habits you can take up early on in the project to facilitate fair data sharing at the end of the project. By the end of the project, I mean the project between data creation and publication, okay? It can be a PhD thesis, it can be one paper, it can be something else. We are using projects very liberally here as a word, okay? So I will have now a question break as well as an actual break, because it's 2:45, okay? And we are a little more than halfway through the presentation. So I want to suggest that we take a 15-minute break now. Don't forget to get moving a little bit, because we've been sitting for nearly 2 hours, right? 1 hour 45, okay? And so if you have a question, you can type it in the chat box. You can raise your hand and turn on your microphone. I would propose that we function like this. I will step away from my keyboard for like 4 or 5 minutes, okay? Because I live by what I preach, and I want to go get an extra glass of water, maybe a cup of coffee, and move around a bit. So I will be back here in 5 minutes, checking the chat box, and we can like ask more questions to each other during those extra 10 minutes of breaks. Does that sound acceptable to you? So we can, if that's okay with you, Albina, we can take a break now, meet up again at 3, but I will be here at 2:50 to answer questions, if any. And of course, if any question is of extra relevance, I will address it after we are all back from the break, of course, so that everyone gets the same access to the discussions.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith. It is Svetlana.
Hi, Svetlana, good to
I
see you.
am back, yes, and replace Albena, so I will continue with you.
Thank you.
All sounds great to me as you proposed, and let's take a little break.
All right, so at the latest, everyone, see you at 3. Thank you. See you in a minute. I will stop my video and my microphone, but I will be right back. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. See you
Okay,
later.
thank you very much.
See you. Okay, so I'm back. In the meantime, during the break, if you have any question or anything that you need clarified, let me know. Turn on your mic, we can chat, or you can type it in the chat box. I'll be right here. resuming in 2 minutes. So now is the time to go have a refill on your water bottle or on your coffee, and then we will resume. About ready to resume. So let me remind you that we'll be using the book club, and actually we will kick off the second half of our presentation by using the book club for a quick poll. And also I would be happy to see your faces again. So if your connection allows it, and if you're okay with that, you can turn your camera back on so that I don't feel like I'm talking only to myself. Now, is everyone back from their break? And can we resume? We will anyway resume with a poll on the WooClap app. Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. We will anyway resume with an exercise on the WooClap app. Well, not really an exercise, more like a poll. We will now be talking about data storage. And I would like to get to know your data storage habits a little more. So please connect to the WooClap app. I will copy the link in the chat box again. And I would like you to answer the following few questions about your data storage habits. All right. I am waiting for you to connect on the WooClap app and to answer the first question. So this is not like, what do you think you should be doing? Okay, this is what are you doing in terms of data storage? Okay. For example, the first question is very simple. Where do you keep your data stored? You can click on the answer that best applies to your situation. Do you keep your data on your laptop, on USB sticks, or on portable hard drives? Do you use clouds? Do you have access to servers that are managed by your institution? Do you store them online in data repositories like we mentioned, Zenodo, OSF, for example? Or are you not sure, or elsewhere? Elsewhere actually may apply if you are using physical data, because these are all solutions for numerical data, okay? Let's say we are talking about numerical data here today. So I can see that more people are connecting to the WooClap. I will give you like maybe an extra, let's say 30 seconds to answer the WooClap. We still have a lot to cover together. So now we will talk about data storage. This is what we're doing on the WooClap. And then we have data analysis. And then we have a little quiz. Just for fun, no prize, no grades, no nothing. All right, so most of you are using a laptop. Some of you are using portable hard drives. And a few of you are using university managed servers or institution managed servers. Okay, so these are the results. Okay. Following question, next question. Do you back up your data? Do you continuously back up your data? Like if you're using a cloud storage, for example? Do you back up by plugging in one of those very handy hard drives every week, every month, sometimes? Or are you not really concerned with backing up your data? Be honest. It's not about what you think you should be doing. It's about what you do, all right? And bear in mind, all of these are anonymous. So I have no idea who does what. And we will actually just talk about what we should be doing in the next few slides. We've already actually talked about it a little bit, because if you're using sensitive data or GDPR protected data, you cannot put your data anywhere, or actually not anywhere you want. Okay, so you back up sometimes on average. So you think about it, but you don't do it like continuously. About a third of you do it continuously. Okay, thank you. Next question. Do you sometimes erase data? Do you erase data if, for example, it is an obvious mistakenly measured data? Like, for example, if your machine has obviously done something icky and you are just not considering it? Or do you erase data if you have decided you will not be using it? At the end of the day, you don't need it, so you erase it. Do you erase data after publication? Or do you never erase data? Oh, you're divided on this one. Some of you would never do such a thing. Some of you will erase data if they are legally obliged to. And some of you will erase data when they decided they will not be using it. Keep clicking. There's plenty of participants and only a few people connected to the WOO Club. So again, participation to the exercises is not mandatory, but you are missing out on interactivity. So. Okay, so 38% have clicked on yes when I'm legally obliged to. Oh, wait, it's still moving. Now it's a third for yes when I have decided I will not be using it, a third for legally obliged, and a third for I would never do such a thing. Okay, next question. Do you keep track of every single operation your data goes through? How do you keep track of what you do on a daily basis? How do you make sure that you remember a week from now what you have done today? Do you keep paper notes? Do you keep documentation files on your laptop? Do you use a naming convention that you can understand, naming your files in a convenient manner? Do you use a lab book maybe if you do lab work or field work? Or is there any other way for you to keep track of your work? Okay. So we use documentation either in physical form or in numerical form. The naming convention, that's one I used to use when I was doing my PhD thesis. Someone is using a lab book, so that's cool. A lab book is basically mandatory if you do lab work or field work. Okay. Ooh, 2 of you are living on the edge, not even keeping track of what you're doing. Okay. So the most clicked on answer is I use documentation files on my laptop, which makes sense. I mean, it's right there. It's easy for you to just open a notebook or a Word document and work in that. Okay, so now it's a tie between laptop files, naming convention, and I'm living on the edge. Okay. Okay, thank you for answering. Do we have another question? We do, but for later in the game. Okay, so now I have a better understanding of your storage habits. Let's talk a little bit about data storage. So usually you have to remember, right? We are talking about research data management in the scope of scientific reproducibility. So data storage is about having your data handy so that you can do work on it, basically, but also keeping your data safe and sustainable for publication and sharing. All right. Now, usually you have 4 families of data storage. We have already talked profusely about data repositories like Zenodo, OSF, or disciplinary data repositories, or institution data repositories like Dataverse, for example. So data repositories are platforms online on which you can publish data files openly, right? So they are meant for sharing, not really meant for storage, okay? That's not like, if your data is on Zenodo, it means that your project is already very mature and that you already have a publication or 2 associated, maybe, okay? In most cases. It's not, you do not put on Zenodo the data on which you are still working, okay? You will probably use one of the 3 other families of storage. So data repositories and clouds are often mixed together, but there are differences. Data repositories are platforms made for sharing. Clouds, such as, for example, Google Drive or Dropbox, are meant for storage. They can also be used for sharing, but they're meant for storage, all right? And then we have the physical storage family with 2 members in it: institution servers, so servers that are managed by your university or research institution, and external storage, that would be your laptop, which is basically a glorified hard drive, okay? Physical hard drive or USB sticks, okay? Or something that you use to store your data, all right? Oops, sorry. Now, how do you choose between those data storage solutions? Well, you have to keep into account the following questions. How do you document your files? How do you organize them? What level of security and what level of sustainability are you looking for into your storage solution? Now, again, I don't have, like, I'm not going to end up this presentation by saying you should be using this solution for this type of storage and nothing else, because you should be able as a scientist to appropriate yourselves, to sort of make sure that you find a solution that best fits the reality of your project. Okay, so you have quite a diversity of topics, data, volumes, natures, everything we discussed in data management planning. And now you want to find the best storage solution for yourself. It is your responsibility to find it, but I will give you the keys to find it. So you should be able to keep track as much as possible between raw data and results, even results that are inconclusive, because an inconclusive result is still a result. You shouldn't discard it. All your results matter, okay? In that optics, if you only remember one thing today, it's this: never erase anything. Even the points that your machine obviously has measured, like, even if it is obvious that your machine has malfunctioned, even if it is obviously an error in, I don't know, a simulation or something, it is part of your scientific process and you should not erase it. Sorry, I am not saying you should use it. I am saying you should not erase it. There's a difference. The fact that your machine has malfunctioned is part of your scientific process. It says something about your data collection process, something maybe you don't like, but it does say something. And the fact that you are choosing to ignore aberration points also is part of your scientific process. So you should never erase anything. You should keep that in mind because it may mean that you need more storage space than you think you do, okay? So never erase anything. The difference between data dredging and reproducibility is telling people what you do. It's okay to play around with your data. It's okay to filter out stuff. It's okay to resample it. It's okay to torture it even, as long as when you publish, you are able to relate everything you have done to your data. Okay, so the difference between fraud, basically, and reproducibility is telling people what you have done. Okay? So never erase anything and keep track. Traceability is a key ingredient of reproducibility. So I have so much information that I need to keep track of. How do I organize them? Not one single solution that works, but I would suggest that you have this sort of tree structure. Okay, this is very mundane, so I'm just going to brush it up. But you should have your data, your original data files, like the files you have downloaded, collected, whatever. You have them in a folder, and you do not touch that folder ever again. This is your original data. This is the origin story of your result, and you keep it forever untouched. You copy that folder, and in those working files, you do whatever you please on your data without altering the originals. Okay, can you tell the difference between those two folders? So one of them is the original, the other one is the data you work in. And there you have complete freedom as a scientist to play around with your data. Make sure, however, that you are enjoying your freedom in a responsible way. That means documenting your process so that when you have to publish, you have all the information handy. Okay? And this is like telling you how to put files in folders is really, really patronizing, right? But it is the first step towards scientific reproducibility. So I swear I am not trying to insult your intelligence here, but having your data on a separated folder, the original files, and never ever erasing it ever is scientific reproducibility, okay? So that means that you have your original data files and your documentation files. These are the files that are useful when you are planning a publication, okay? So organizing your data in a relevant manner and guaranteeing the security of your data. So for example, if your folders need to be protected from leaking, if you need a certain level of confidentiality, there is some storage solutions in these families that you cannot use. Can you tell me, do you have an idea? I have seen your question, Prasida. Can you tell me, for example, which of these 4 boxes is a big no when using confidential data or GDPR data? Any idea? You can use the chat box. 1 chance out of 4. Yeah, okay, you cannot share them in a data repository, of course, yes, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Brigitte says the cloud. Who agrees with Brigitte? Data repositories, yeah, okay. Data repositories are actually not even meant for storage. But if you're using GDPR data or if you're using confidential data, clouds are automatically no. Why is that? Unless you have an institution-hosted cloud, unless you have an infrastructure in your own university, that is a cloud. You cannot put GDPR data on Google Drive, on Dropbox, on or any other externally operated cloud, because that is essentially outsourcing your data storage. You have no control over the servers of Google Drive. You have no idea where they are, and they can burn up, they can, I don't know, I mean, you have no control of your data if you put them on Google Drive. Okay, I'm not saying Google Drive is evil and you shouldn't use it. I'm just saying not for confidential data. Anyway, the question is even not on the table because it would be illegal. All right. So if you are using GDPR data and you really want to store them in a non-physical way, you have to have an institution-operated cloud. Some institutions do, some don't, and I'm sorry, but if yours don't, then it's going to be complicated. Then maybe you need to budget some sort of infrastructure to keep them online, okay? Now, a good idea, so that would be like, so security in terms of leaking, but what about security in terms of losing? Usually, we advise to back up 3 copies of the data on 2 different storage solutions with one offsite, okay? So the 3-to-1 rule. And if you have the space to only back up pieces of this structure that I would advise you use, you only back up the original data and the documentation files, because theoretically, you can reconstruct the working files from the original data and the documentation files. Again, theoretically, okay? But I am providing you with a theoretical solution that you will need to grasp and make yours, all right? Sorry, this might be a little bit frustrating. I'm not providing you with a ready-made recipe, but this is how we do, all right? And then sustainability would be, can someone reuse my data easily in like 10 years, for example? Is it in a format that is likely to be still available later on? Is it well documented? Is it well described? Okay, and would it be available? So that's why also, if you put it in an editor's website, maybe keep a local copy as well, okay? Because maybe in 10 years, the website has bankrupted or anything, I don't know, and the data is no longer available. Even, I mean, there are embargoes period, but even after years, data is still your responsibility. So it is your responsibility to make it available. Now, Prasida, for your question with an example, it is super complicated for me to provide an example from the top of my head, okay? But I can provide the example of my own data, my own PhD thesis, for example. I downloaded data from the Hubble Space Telescope Open Database. So the original data lives on the database of the Hubble Space Telescope, which is an open database. Anyone can access it. I would download the images that I need to cook up my own database, sub-database, and this would be the first folder, original data files. So the untouched raw images that I have downloaded go into the first folder, and they stay there forever. The only thing I can do to that folder is add any image that I choose to study further on. I do not remove anything, it's my untouched raw data. I copy these images and I filter them, convolute them, sum them up, divide them by each other, filter them, clean them up. Everything that I need to do on my images, they are done on files that live in this folder. And I kept a Word notebook actually. And for the codes that I created myself, I used Jupyter Notebook. So the Python codes, and it's a Python environment that helps you keeping track of everything you do by putting your codes in, let's say, a very neat way, right? This is not a technical class today. So I use these documentation files in this folder. And as for the result files, well, actually I published 2 papers with these working files. So there were 2 result files, one for paper 1, one for paper 2. Okay. But this is a general structure that you have to make yours. And it's actually even more complicated if you're using physical data. Okay. So to come back to the 4 families, data repositories are not meant for storage. They are meant for sharing. Okay. And they may imply outsourcing too. So it's really nice to practice fair data and use Zenodo, for example, if you have published a paper, but make sure that you keep a local copy. And it's super fine that you have structured metadata and everything, but it is still outsourcing, okay? Clouds, as opposed to data repositories, have no metadata structure. You can just dump files in a folder and you can organize the folders as you wish. There are no metadata. So clouds would be okay, for example, backing up your data. That's what I did. Also, we have at the University of Liège, we have the privilege of having an institution-operated cloud, so an internal cloud on servers that belong to the university. So I keep the control on my data and I back up my original data file plus my documentation files on the cloud. All right. I advise to use it for backup, but you can also use this for your working file. Depends on your mobility as a scientist, if you are a nomad or if you are switching institutions often. For example, if you are in co-tutorship, it may be a good idea for you to use delocalized, unphysical storage, okay? And if you go back to the physicals, which are also good, right? Okay, so that was weird. My computer just died on me, but I can see that everything is back to normal now. So I will continue as if nothing. Let me know if you missed anything. All right. So Non-physical storage, okay for backing up, or okay if you are a little bit of a nomad. Physical storage, I would advise also to use it not individually, but use the internet storage as a backing up, okay? Be mindful of the level of protection of the hard drives and everything that you use. Password protection is always a good one. And the solution that I like the best is the university servers. So if you have the opportunity to, if you have access to internal servers, so it means that servers that you personally do not handle, but the university handles, then you have automatically access to a backup plan, to a security plan. You are automatically compliant with most regulations, or at least most likely. So if you have the possibility of using institution server, that's the way to go. But otherwise, you have to make do with the rest of the solutions. Okay? So it's a good idea to mix and match. For example, my working data on a hard drive plus backup on a cloud, my sharing data on Zenodo. So you have to apply these, I want to say, suggestions to your own reality. I see that I have questions in the chat. Okay. I will back to them. You will get the slideshow, and there is an extra slide here with a few tools that I like, but they're just suggestions, and this is not a technical presentation, so you can do anything you like with any tool you like. So we have a question break now. Let me go to the chat. Documentation files means a notepad or some such thing. Yes, that will explain. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So a documentation file is a journal, a notebook, a lab book, codes, pieces of codes, comments on your pieces of codes. So anything that makes it possible for you to go from the original data to the result data. And I hope that you all can see that this is the core of reproducibility. Okay, so this ridiculous little slide that I'm embarrassed to even show is the core of scientific reproducibility, at least for yourself. Then there's what you show to everyone else. Okay. Now we will go into that, what you show to everyone else part in the next slide. We will talk about data management and ethics. Do we have any more questions on data storage? I know this part of the presentation is a little frustrating because I don't provide any concrete advice, but I hope you can navigate these suggestions and use them the best you can. If you have access to institution servers, they're the way to go, really. No problem, Priscilla. No more questions on storage? You have few questions. Maybe we're just that good. Okay. Anyway, if a question comes up to you later, feel free to type it in the chat box, even slides later, I don't mind. Now, data management and ethics. This is an interesting part, and this is the last part of the presentation. So we will go through this, and then we will have a little quiz to wrap everything up. Does that sound good? Bear with me, we're almost there. So, as we mentioned earlier, we researchers live in a paradoxical context that may push us, even unconsciously, far away from the path of reproducibility, which should be the general. Pushed away from that path may lead us to some consequences, and we can even not be really conscious of it. So there's degrees of irreproducibility to scientific research, okay? Bear in mind, none of them is acceptable, but there's degrees of seriousness, all right? And so irreproducible science, I told you reproducible science is important for society, important for yourself as a researcher, but it's also important for your reputation. And the opposite actually is even more true, which means that irreproducible science most likely will have an even bigger impact on your reputation. It can be suspicious, okay? Let's go first to that, I want to say, obvious level of irreproducibility that is not being tolerated in any of the universities we work in. That would be imposture. That would be scientific fraud. I'm just putting it there so that we know our baseline where we start, but you all know what scientific fraud is. That would be falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. I have seen the question, but I will address it later. Okay. Falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. These are the three types of scientific fraud that have legal consequences and that basically are not tolerated anywhere. So this is like what is clearly unacceptable to everyone, to every scientist in every discipline. Okay, it happens, fraud happens for many reasons, but what we are interested in today is what comes before the fraud, between the fraud and the good science. It's not like black and white, there's a gray area, and this gray area is something that we are trying to navigate with research data management. Okay, so being organized helps you navigate that area, being transparent helps you navigate that area, keeping track of everything you do helps you navigate that area. And then now we are going to talk about data analysis and which processes we use and how to navigate that area. Okay, now there are some bad habits or some questionable practice that we may be tempted to use and that we may use even unconsciously. And I want to go through 3 examples of these bad practice and then bring awareness to you about these things that we should not be doing. And before we do that, I want to show you a little video that is a talk show from John Oliver. So it has nothing to do with science. So before I do that, I'm going to address Prasida's questions. If we have no institutional servers available, are there any other platform? Actually, that's the deal. So if you are using something that is not part of your institution, you are outsourcing data management. Okay. In some cases, maybe why not? Maybe if you have a contract, maybe if you have a contract with a partner, or maybe if you are working in a consortium, and part of your consortium has university servers, maybe they can be in charge of data management. But again, every time you are making such a compromise, it is outsourcing. Okay, if you have no institutional server, maybe you have budget to buy some storage space for yourself. Maybe you have budget to buy a couple of hard drives. Okay, that's no servers, but you have to find the best solutions in those 4 boxes with your reality. I just told you that I like university servers best because they are automatically the most compliant option. But if you don't have access to university servers, not everything is lost. But anytime you are looking, okay, so no possibility of servers in my university, I'm going to look somewhere else. The moment you decide to look somewhere else, you are outsourcing. Okay, and if you're using confidential data or human data, outsourcing is no. And if you are using data that is, I want to say, normal, okay, as in exempt from these regulations, outsourcing can be okay, but you have to make an informed decision. Informed how? By going back to these previous 4 slides about data storage. So it's okay to use external storage in some cases. It's okay to put data on Google Drive even. If you want to use Google Drive, I'm okay with that. You just have to know what you're doing when you're doing it. Okay? I would say it's not okay to use only Google Drive, if that makes you happier. And any other free, safe storage solutions, when I find it, I will let you know. But if that existed, my job would be a lot easier. So I'm sorry, but at the moment, no. Thank you for this question. I think this is a very good question, actually. All right, so back to data dredging. So John Oliver, he's a talk show host. He has nothing to do with science whatsoever, but he had a segment a few years ago that I want to show you. It's supposed to be funny, okay? So it's not a documentary, it's not something scientific, okay? It's just a reflection on a societal phenomenon, and that is data dredging. So he will be talking about what some scientists are pushed towards doing because of the pressure to publish, because of the publish or perish mentality, and what it means for everyday people. What it means, because we know as scientists, we're not everyday people, right? But for the rest of the world, what does it mean for them? What does it mean for society as a whole, actually? Okay, now this video has been edited. I have edited it, okay? So it's not the whole video. It's only the bits I want you to see. And it's also available on YouTube, okay? But this edition is, the way I have edited it is only available in this slideshow, obviously, okay? I will launch the video. If there is any technical issue, make yourselves known. Here we go. It's very short.
Science. The thing we love and respect so much, we only allow scientists to be portrayed by the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Nicolas Cage, and Al Pacino. That is how much we respect them and the complexity of the work they do. Science is constantly producing new studies, as you would know if you've ever watched TV.
A new study shows how sugar might fuel the growth of cancer.
A new study shows late-night snacking could damage the part of your brain that creates and stores memories.
A new study finds pizza is the most addictive food in America.
A new study suggests hugging your dog is bad for your dog.
A new study showing that drinking a glass of red wine is just as good as spending an hour at the gym.
What? That last one? No! That last one doesn't even sound like science. It's more like something your sassy aunt would wear on a t-shirt. There are now so many studies being thrown around, they can seem to contradict one another. In just the last few months, we've seen studies about coffee that claim it may reverse the effects of liver damage, help prevent colon cancer, decrease the risk of endometrial cancer, and increase the risk of miscarriage. Scientists are under constant pressure to publish, with tenure and funding on the line. And to get published, it helps to have results that seem new and striking, because scientists know nobody is publishing a study that says nothing up with acai berries. And to get those results, there are all sorts of ways that, consciously or not, you can tweak your study. You could alter how long it lasts, or make your random sample too small to be reliable, or engage in something that scientists call p-hacking. It's very complicated, but it basically means collecting lots of variables and then playing with your data until you find something that counts as statistically significant, but is probably meaningless. For example, the website 538 surveyed 54 people and collected over 1,000 variables, and through p-hacking the results, was able to find statistically significant correlations between eating cabbage and having an innie belly button, drinking iced tea and believing Crash didn't deserve to win Best Picture, and eating raw tomatoes and Judaism. And if you think I'm exaggerating about the impact that this misreporting can have on our faith in science, look at an example from some of the people most guilty of it. Because the Today Show, which lives for scientific studies, recently concluded one segment like this.
Like a lot of studies that we love around here, there have been a couple, especially related to women, about the benefits, as I get all serious, on whole milk. Hey, whole milk, but it's true.
Well, there's a lot of research, though, that says actually having whole milk or having whole fat dairy products actually can help you lose weight.
I think the way to live your life is you find the study that sounds best to you, and you go with that.
No! No, 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 no!
All right. So this weird montage of a John Oliver segment from a few years ago already about scientific studies and how they contradict each other, and basically how it makes us scientists look a little bad, right, in the eyes of society, in the eyes of the world. So in this segment, John Oliver mentions a few things that we scientists may be doing without even realizing it. We talk about data dredging. He mentioned one type of data dredging. Did you notice it? Like one specific bad practice? Can you maybe type into the chat if you noticed the specific behavior that he mentioned? The one, yes, exactly, p-hacking. Duly noted, Matteo. So this video highlights basically how a lack of reproducibility leads to a confusion, a general confusion about how reliable a result can be, okay? New study show, new study show, new study show is basically a consequence of how we scientists are not transparent enough about what not only, okay? Because the media obviously plays a role in it, but that's not the question of today. But as scientists, if we try and stick to factual, reproducible stuff, we are less likely to steer the confusion about new study show, new study show, new study show. All right, so reproducibility is good for science, good for your career, and also good for John Oliver's and all others talk shows. All right, does that like surprise you? Does that like shock you? I'm sure that as scientists, when you go to like, I don't know, family dinners or something, people tend to ask you what you do or what exactly it is you study, and you have had a hard time explaining it, right? Especially the further you get into the career, the more specialized you get, and the harder it is for you to be completely transparent about everything. You figured maybe your grandma doesn't need to know all of your hypotheses for her to know what exactly you are working on, all right? And as scientists, when we communicate about our science, we make choices about what we tell and what we don't tell, especially to the media. But to other fellow scientists, this choice shouldn't even be like part of the question. We should be transparent, all right? Is that something that you are surprised? Does that surprise you? Or if you have any strong reaction, feel free to raise your hand or maybe just yell into the microphone or type into the chat box. But this is basically so a summary of what was said in that video. The pressure to publish pushes us towards, consciously or not, tweaking our studies until we find something statistically significant. And that is also part of data management, because we are in the data analysis block of the data lifecycle. Okay. P-hacking is one of them, but they are, I'm not sure how comfortable with statistics we all are, but I'm just going to mention a few of the behaviors that I want you to be aware of so that you can avoid them, okay? The rule of thumb, if you are not like super happy with statistics and everything, just remember this. The rule of thumb is that it is always okay as a scientist to play around with your data. You can chop it up into samples, you can arrange it as you like, you can filter out everything you want. But the difference between data dredging and exploring a data set is telling about it in your publications. So if you have a subsample of your data that produces a statistically significant result, it should be presented as such, as a subsample of a bigger sample, for example. That's the difference between data dredging and reproducibility. And I assure you, it's not always that obvious, okay? It's not always that self-evident between data analysis and publication. So cherry picking would be data dredging as well, only selecting carefully the data that supports your pet hypothesis or that supports whatever you are trying to prove or disprove, all right? For example, if you are only picking the points that are convenient for you in a graph, for example. What does altering how long it lasts mean? We will maybe see in outcome switching, but it means cutting your analysis short, especially if you are working with a clinical study, like in the follow-up after a year or two, if you have results that come up that contradict your hypothesis, whereas in the first 6 months it was really supported, then maybe you can cut it short, or you can make it longer. So it means like altering the duration of the protocol. Maybe the duration of a simulation, maybe the duration of a clinical trial. Okay, so this is very interdisciplinary, and which is why it is difficult for me to go into details, okay? So cherry picking, oops, sorry. Filtering out is okay. Neglecting to mention that you have filtered out data is not. Makes sense, right? That's filtering out, that's cherry picking. Outcome switching is a big one as well. Let's say, if I remember correctly, we do not have many people in the medical field here, right? But outcome switching would be during, so it's actually most often encountered in clinical trials, but it's also valid in most scientific protocols or in disciplines that have scientific protocols actually, would be during the execution of a protocol, you sort of see where the result is going and you don't really like it. So you deliberately forget parts of the tests that you don't like and only report on parts of the test that you like. It's essentially cherry picking, but for results, okay? So there was a famous example of that, I think it was 10 years ago, which is the PACE trial. Let me just go one slide further. The PACE trial was a research in UK investigating the connection between exercising, okay, and decreasing the symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome. That's myalgic encephalomyelitis, myelitis, however that's pronounced. So chronic fatigue syndrome, okay, ME, for the purpose of this conversation. And so basically they were testing different combinations of medical treatments and exercising, then moderate treatment with exercising and cognitive therapy. So that means basically positive thoughts. And these were the results. Okay, so some of the tests were inconclusive, but one of the tests did sort of lean in favor of the cognitive therapy arguments. And then there were, I'm going very quickly about this because we're not in the medical field, but this is like an example of data dredging, okay? There were papers, scientific papers and mainstream media papers that had headlines like chronic fatigue syndrome can be overcome by positive thinking and exercise, okay? So it leads to real world consequence if we are not 100% transparent about what we do, because there were people who were suffering from ME and were told by their doctors who were basing themselves on scientific results that were published in peer-reviewed papers to tell them to just drop the medication and go for a run and think happy thoughts. That sounds dangerous to me, all right? So I think this was in 2011, right? Okay, so the paper here came out in 2013, so it's less than 10 years ago. In Science, that's basically yesterday, all right? So this paper was quickly sort of disproved because many colleagues of these, or many people in the scientific field sort of felt that something was wrong, and the something that turned out to be wrong was the outcome switching. So they did discard about 3 out of 4 tests in their experimental protocols, all right? Now a solution for that would have been to publish the protocol beforehand, but maybe that doesn't concern the world outside of the medical world. So unless there's someone who is specifically working on that, I think I can move on to p-hacking. So p-hacking is basically tweaking your data until you find a correlation between 2 variables that counts as statistically significant. Whatever variables, however relevant the correlation, as long as it is statistically significant, you are going to publish it. That's the spirit of p-hacking, all right? Obviously, we're not looking as scientists, we're not looking for statistically significant only. We are looking for statistically significant and scientifically relevant, all right? So obviously, chances are that if you have a large enough data set and you have enough variables, you have collected plenty of them and you play around with them, you will find correlations. Remember in the video, there were correlations about eating tomatoes and being Jewish. There were correlations between eating cabbage and having some sort of belly button, okay? So obviously there is little scientific relevancy to those correlations, but they are statistically significant. So if you are working a lot on statistics, maybe you should be aware of what p-hacking is, all right? Just a quick show of hands, or maybe can you just type into the chat box, can you type if you know what a p-value is? Just so I know that I'm not talking nonsense to anyone here. Can you type yes if you know what a p-value is and no if you don't know what it is? Okay, okay, so some of you are familiar. No is an acceptable answer. I'm just trying to see if I should bore you with the details or not. Okay, thank you. Okay, great. So far I only have 4 answers, but there are a majority of yes. So a p-value is basically a measure of the probability to obtain the same data, even if the hypothesis that you are testing is wrong. All right. So you know what? Because you all know what a p-value is, or at least are afraid to tell me that you don't know what a p-value is, I'm going to assume that we are sort of familiar with p-values and that we already know that p-values are just an indication about a scientific result. P-value itself is not a scientific result, okay? A p-value is only part of a larger reflection. It is a good indicator that the hypothesis is correct, but it is not enough to prove a hypothesis is true, or to prove that even the protocol was suitable for the test, or even to prove that the data was of good quality and of good relevancy for the test. All right. So data dredging, just because we are clinging to the idea of having a significant p-value, is one of the behaviors that should basically trigger an alarm in your head. Okay. And also, if you have to tweak your data to find a significant p-value, the difference between data dredging and playing around with data is publishing about it. Okay, so I'm just going to skip the game about p-hacking and nutrition because John Oliver actually delivered all the answers already, but I'm going to take some time for a question break here. So we just discussed about data storage and data dredging. Do you have questions so far? And then while you type in your questions or while you raise your hand to ask questions, I'm gonna make sure, okay, so then we can go to the quiz. Okay, perfect. Questions about this last chapter, data dredging, data storage. I think I addressed all the data storage questions. Let me scroll up. Yes. And documentation files, yes, okay. Any new questions? Or maybe just everyone is away from keyboard at the moment and I'm just talking to like 5 people. I'm not familiar with everyone's level of comfort in statistics and in experimental protocols, and I'm trying to keep everything as cross-disciplinary as possible. So my apologies if you wanted to learn more about p-hacking and you didn't get to, but you know what? You have my email address, or at least you will have it after this session. If you have more questions about those topics and we can go deeper into details, I would be happy to help you. Moving on then. We are almost at the end of the presentation, actually. I just want to take a few slides to sort of tidy up everything that we've learned today and link it back to the concept of reproducibility. And then if you are up for it, we will have a small game. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6 questions, all right? So it's just for you to see how you can position yourselves on data management dilemmas after this session, all right? All right, last minutes of attention. Promise I will be done very soon. So remember, research data management is first and foremost what? A list, a group of best practices that support scientific reproducibility, okay? Within these best practices, the ones I have most insisted upon are keeping track of everything you have done so that you are exempt from any suspicion of data dredging when you are publishing anything. So never erase anything, keep track of everything, make sure that your original data is safe, backed up, and if you are subject to rules and regulations, make sure that you are compliant to those rules and regulations. All right, protect your valuable science. Okay, good habits in data storage enables traceability and accountability. Okay, and good research data management habits are good for yourself, good for your career, good for your fellow scientists, and also good for science as a society, as a community, because it facilitates fair data sharing. So open data should be your destination. Fair data should be the path to the destination. If you get to open data, amazing, you've done it. If you cannot go to open data for legal or strategic reasons, okay, intellectual property, Gdpr, or whatever, you still need to position yourself as far as possible towards open data in the fair spectrum. And one way to do so is to use metadata. Do you remember that? Open science is the cherry on top of the cake. Research data management is the foundation. Actually, ethics is the foundation, but this is a little bit off topic. Although I could talk for hours about ethics, but I promised I would be done by 4. Okay, and let's remember that well-managed data is a foundation for fair data, which in itself is a foundation for open data. But open data alone, without this logical path, is not a token of quality, okay? For example, your data can be safe and secure. It can be stored in a very permanent format with good compliance with rules and regulations. That would be like the first level of management. And then they're suitable for sharing, or at least the metadata is suitable for sharing. They are documented. They are protected by a license that is as open as possible. So then you are moving further down the path of open data. And then the sweet spot, if that's possible for your project, and only if that's possible for your project, would be that they can be made accessible in an open way for everyone to reuse. For example, in an open data repository. Okay, if you are not putting your data in an open data repository, they still have to be reusable. So if you are storing it in a hard drive or something, maybe when you go on a postdoc, leave the hard drive at your university, you know, or maybe make sure that they are backed up somewhere in a university server. Have a plan, okay? Have a strategy. Make sure that your data doesn't die with your PhD thesis is over. Okay. Now, if we go too far and too quickly towards the destination of open data, we may want to keep in mind that using data from an open database that is not fair is not a token of quality. Open data can be plagiarized, can be fabricated, can be falsified, can be of poor quality. It can lack the basic description of metadata and README files that we usually have when we use data repositories like Zenodo. Okay, it can also be in a proprietary format, using a software that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. All right. So open data in itself, without the fairness foundation, is of little use to the community. So this is basically the chart that I really want you to remember after this seminar. And this is also relevant outside of science. In a world that is basically data-driven, how you position yourselves in these circles can also be applied to, say, private companies or governments or policies or nonprofits. Okay, these are transferable skills. So, unless you have more questions, I would like to invite you for the last 5 minutes to play along in a little quiz. The quiz that will help you wrap up all the knowledge that we have had today. All right, so maybe I can paste the Woo clap one last time, and then we will play together. And then obviously we will have a question break. Now, before we go to the game, I would like to remind you of a few things. After this session, I will continue working with the very kind organizers from the Euraccess network. Okay, that would be Svetlana and Albena. Also my colleague Brigitte, who helped me getting in touch with these wonderful people. I will be continuing to work with them so that you get the slideshow, the sources, and my contact info. All right, so no worries. I see that we have a question, okay? So I'm just gonna address it now. Can fair data also be considered ethical data? Well, technically it should be. So fair data means that your data has been sort of approved for publication. All right. So if your data has been collected in an unethical manner, at some point you should have had the obstacle of not being able to publish it. Say, for example, if someone came to an institution and basically ignored the clearances for data collection. I'm sure, Priscilla, that this will speak to you. So maybe the issue that you shared with us earlier, even if the person shares the data in a fair manner, it can still be unethical. All right. Most likely, at least for research in Europe, the legal structure that we have to navigate for data with ethics committees and everything is so strong that we can trust probably 99% of the data sets that we download. But it is true that technically, theoretically, right, in a theoretical world, it is possible to have fair data that was obtained in an unethical manner. I guess, yes. So it's not only about producing fair data, it's about having a critical mind. And thank you for bringing that to our attention, Priscilla. That's actually very relevant. This is a data management seminar, but it is really tempting to go beyond this mere topic and to talk about the ethics of everything. But you know what? We have 3 hours and we will most likely be like 5 minutes over time. So, but I would be happy to continue discussing maybe in another seminar. If the access people are kind enough.
Arrange one later.
Look at that. That's amazing, right? In the meantime, want to play the game? Back to the WOOC lab? All right. First question. I want you to tell me, imagine that you have just downloaded a paper with an annex that is full of graphs and figures illustrating the data set. So you have, let's say, PDF graphs or PNG format graphs, okay? And everything is illustrated in a very transparent way, the workflow, the data. Do you think this is a fair way to share data? I want you to think about the acronym FAIR, all right? Do you think that an annex full of graphs is a fair way to share data? Take a few seconds and click on yes or no. I will give you 20 seconds. And I'm actually timing, okay? I'm not checking my messages, I'm actually timing. We have 67% of no and 33% of yes so far. Ooh, you're divided. All right, 5 more seconds. Talk about division. Okay, great. These are the results. We are 43% yes, 57% no. Actually, this is not a fair way to share data. Although it is findable, accessible, it is not reusable. How can you use a graph to feed into new research? You cannot use a graph most likely for statistical analysis or for any other kind of analysis. So an image, unless of course your data is an image, of course, but a table, a graph, a pie chart or anything is not a fair way to share data. You should be sharing the original data, or the person you have downloaded the paper from should be sharing the original data in a text file, for example. That would be the most, or a CSV file, that would be the most fair way to go. All right, so reusability, it's also about format. Good. 57% of correct, that's good, that's a success. Next question, you have just downloaded a paper along with the data files provided directly from the open access journal website. So this time it's not only the figures, but you have downloaded the data files. The data sets come in 3 large Excel files, but little explanation is provided about the common contents. Do you think that is a fair way to share data? So we have moved up from images to Excel files. Now is it fair? What do you think? This is just a game, right? You're not playing anything and you will still get the same treatment as everyone else. So what do you think? 15 more seconds. Maybe flip a coin? Oh, there's division in this group. There's division. Come on, only 4 people are playing. Maybe more time will help you make your decision. Okay, so we are leaning towards yes. Let me show you the right answer. Actually, no, we're still not in a fair setting because although it is already better than sharing the images, the data sets still need to have explanation about the contents of the Excel files. So it is likely, of course, that some explanation is provided in the paper, but the data set should function, the data set should function independently from the paper it is associated with, okay? So as a single object, the Excel files should be able to be reused as data. So we should have additional README files or headers with explanations about at least the title of the columns or anything. All right, so still no. And bravo to the 30% of you who clicked on no. So not that easy, right, to make fair data? Let's continue. Now you have just downloaded a paper. So we're still in the same situation. This time it's about a psychology study on humans. And you would like to download the supporting data. The paper provides a link to a Zenodo entry, but only the metadata is available. Do you think this is a fair way to share data? So we have the information that it's about humans, that the metadata is available, there's a link on Zenodo, but I can't find the data on Zenodo. Is this still a fair way to share data? What do you think? My God, this group is divided. Few more seconds. My God, I have a perfect 50-50 division in the results here. We are an indecisive bunch, aren't we? All right, let me show you the right answer. Yes, this is a fair way to share data. Okay, so the data file isn't available, but the metadata is available, so it's findable. The data is, well, made available in the most interoperable and reusable way possible, but the data file cannot be made available. Okay, so that's an easy cheat. But why is it okay that the file is not available? Because the study is on humans, so it's most likely GDPR related. So this is the best you can do, making the metadata available is the best you can do on human GDPR subject data. Does that make sense? Perfect. Next question. Now you are not the downloader anymore, you are the publisher, you are the author. You have just published a paper and your supervisor asks for you your permission to publish your dataset on the department website, as you did such a great job. The department website is hosted on faculty servers, and it is where anyone can go, like future students or future collaborators, where they can go to learn more about the research. So basically, your supervisor wants you to publish your dataset on the department website. Okay? Do you think this is a fair way to share data? I'm looking at the people clicking. Okay, so we have 75% no, 25% yes at the moment. More people are playing. Do not hesitate to play. Again, there's nothing at stake. So we have 80% no at the moment and 1% and 20% yes. So my supervisor is asking for my permission, and they want to publish it on the department website. Okay, so 83% no, 17% yes. Let me show you the right answer. It's a no. And why is that a no? Although it's really nice to have your supervisor tell you that you did a great job and that they want to publish your work because it's really nice, the department website is most likely not a data repository, no metadata, no keywords, no possibility to make the data fair, all right? So this is not a fair way to share data. It's nice to be highlighted on the faculty website, but as a compliment, maybe it's nice to put your data on Zenodo as well, all right? Okay, that's what I would do actually. I would tell my supervisor, you know what, thank you. I'm really honored to be highlighted in the website, but maybe you can just share the Zenodo link on the department. Okay, so this one, 83% correct. So most likely makes sense. Now, let's imagine that your supervisor asks you to collect medical data about a whole bunch of patients, as well as their age and occupation. Which storage solution are you likely to adopt? And you have 5 answers. I identify the patients by a number instead of their names. I store the files on a laptop. I store the file on the password-protected hard drive. I back up on Google Drive, and I back up on my faculty storage solution. Maybe you can click on more than one answer on this one. This is a more complicated question, so I'll leave you a little more time. All right. Only 2 people have played so far. I will leave you more time. Still counting. 3, 4. What do you think you might be doing? Okay, great. So we have 71% of the people that have clicked answer 3. I store the file on a password protected hard drive, which I keep in a locked room. You seem to be very hesitant about using Google Drive. And then we have 57% of clicks on I store the file on a laptop that belongs to the lab. Let's debrief. So you do not identify the patients by a number instead of their names, because that is pseudonym, that's not anonymization. So that's basically helpless. It's a good thing to do, but it's not sufficient, all right? It can be easy to trace back someone if you have their identification number, age, and occupation, okay? How many 53-year-old carpenters would be involved in a study about diabetes, for example? Okay, so that's not GDPR compliant. So answer 1 is a no. I store the file on a laptop that belongs to the lab. That's also a no, because it is likely a shared laptop that anyone can access. Okay, so it is not really protected, so not good for GDPR. All right. However, storing the file on a password protected hard drive that you keep in a locked room is usually the way to go for GDPR compliant data. So 71% clicked on that answer. Good job. You keep a backup copy on your personal Google Drive. No, because Google Drive is outsourcing data and GDPR does not go with Google Drive. But if you can keep a backup copy on a cloud storage solution that belongs to your faculty, that's a good way to go. So answer 3 and 5 would be the way to go, and answers 1, 2, and 4 are not relevant to, are not applicable to GDPR. And as soon as you see the word patient or human or age, occupation, name, anything relating to data, to human data, it should ring the bell of GDPR. And it's not only for like medical doctors or for medical science, okay? We were talking with, I think it was Matteo earlier, how applied sciences usually deals with human data without even realizing it, all right? Now, let me see if we have another question. Yes, hang on a minute. Last situation. A colleague consults you for help in choosing a platform to share their data sets. So someone comes to you and goes like, I have this great data set that I want to share. What platform do you recommend, or what do you recommend in terms of data repositories? Do you recommend only publishing data files along with the paper on the journal website? Do you recommend depositing the files on an open repository like Zenodo? Do you recommend using a Dropbox? Do you recommend checking in with the legal affairs department first? Do you recommend depositing everything so that they can clean out their laptop? Which answer do you think is the best? Or maybe there's more than one. Okay. So you seem to be very happy about answer number 4, checking with the legal affairs department. And that makes me happy. And then some of you also like depositing the data files on an open repository. All right. Keep clicking. More people are still playing in, so we'll give you a few more seconds. Come on, this is the last question. Last chance to shine. In front of no one, because this is anonymous, but maybe last chance to shine for yourself. All right, only publishing data files along with the paper on the journal website. So we have 71% of clicks on answer 4, legal affairs department first. And we have 43% of clicks on data files on open repository. 38 now. A few more seconds, and then I will show you the right answers. All right, here we go. So, checking in with the legal affairs department first before we publish anything is always a good way to go. And that's something you would, if you would recommend it to a colleague who comes to you for help, you would be the best colleague anyone could ever have. So congrats if you clicked on that answer. Depositing the data on an open repository like Zenodo is also the destination for fair data. As soon as you're sure that you can publish, then you're good. Now, answer one, only publishing data files on the journal website is not such a great piece of advice, because then you essentially give your data out to the editor, all right, to the journal. Even if it is open access, you are still outsourcing the data sharing and data storage. So not a good idea, but maybe you can do it and make sure that you keep a local copy and make sure that you keep a copy on an open data repository. Okay, so this one is a little bit more in the gray area. But depositing the data file on a Dropbox that is made openly available is not fair. Dropbox is not a data repository, no metadata, no structure. So good job for not clicking on that one. And depositing everything so that you can clean out your laptop is the opposite of scientific reproducibility. If they clean out everything after they published it, they are basically losing track of everything they have ever done. So you should not be advising that, and good job for not clicking on that one. So that is the end of our quiz. I hope that these questions have helped you realize that research data management can also yield dilemmas and complicated questions that have no straightforward answer, okay? And I am confident that you will encounter such questions in your thesis or in your future research projects, and maybe in your future professional life as a whole, even if it is beyond only academia, all right? So I hope that what you have learned today about reproducibility will at least drive you to curiosity about research data management, okay? And even though maybe after this only one session, we are not experts on data management yet, that's okay. I hope that at least when you encounter one of those dilemmas, you will know where to find help. Legal departments, research data officer, I don't know, faculty IT services if you need servers, or anyone in your faculty that you can contact. Or maybe even the Euraccess network, because this is also what the Euraccess network is about, right? Helping each other on the bigger picture. So here's the deal. I really want you to be aware of everything that you can encounter in data management. Even though we do not have the answers, we know where to find them, all right? This is how we are good scientists, by recognizing when we are faced with a question that needs an answer. All right, so I have put up the last question on the WOOC Lab so that you can tell me how you're feeling, all right? And I will now address the questions in the chat box or any other new question that you might have. So again, for the last time, if you want to ask a question, you can type it in the chat box. You can raise your hand using the reaction button at the bottom of the Zoom window, and you can just talk to me. Prasida, you have one more question. Say, for example, we publish a conference report on Zenodo. Okay, thank you, Brigitte. Thank you so much for being this report on Zenodo with the permission and affiliation of a current institution. Can we use this DOI in our CV? Of course. As soon as it is available on Zenodo, it is open. If there is a DOI, it is most likely open. It is basically public information. So yes, have a publication list, show it off, be proud about it, shove it into people's faces, go like, look at me, I did this. This is exactly what fair data is all about. Now, a conference report isn't technically data, that's a publication, okay? So publications are usually easier to make open because they are of, I want to say, less legal value than data usually, but the same goes with data. As soon as it is on Zenodo, it is public information, basically. So yes, it can go on a CV, it can go on your LinkedIn, it can go on ResearchGate, on Facebook, wherever you want it to be, it can be there. Do we have any other questions?
I don't see any.
Me neither. So you will have the sources, more sources also in the slideshow, okay? As well as my contact info and contact info for the Euraccess network. And thank you for participating. I'm really happy about this webinar. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Svetlana. Thank you, Euraccess. Oh, wait, we have one question. Could we have more workshops on data management? Thank you.
We will try. We will try. Okay, thank you everyone for joining today, and especially Judith for this amazing and interesting seminar today. And you will receive soon our materials, video, etc. And have a nice evening for those that are in our time zone, and nice day for the others.
Yes.
It's night. And keep in touch. Keep in touch.
Let's keep in touch. And thank you for all the kind words in the chat box. I'm happy you enjoyed it, and I would be happy to continue the discussion through the Euraccess network anytime.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye. All right. So, hey, thank you, Sandra, Prasida. Thank you. Thank you, Prasida. Thank you for all your interesting questions. Svetlana, I will maybe send the PowerPoint, right?